pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. All right. Just want to, Donna is obviously not here, our chairperson. She had a family emergency, so she asked me to take over, and she extends her apologies for missing the meeting. Fire evacuation. If in the event of a fire, you can go out these doors, down the doors to the left, down the stairs, and out away from the building, or you can just go right through these back doors, out away from the building. Roll call, please.
Donna Corbin-Savinsky, absent. Kevin Zorda.
Present.
Virginia Higley, here. Kelly Hemler.
Here.
Dylan Bridge.
Present.
Nancy Martin.
Here.
Ann Collins.
Present.
Christopher Renault, absent. Ken Kaufman.
Here.
Okay.
Thank you. All right. Does anybody in the audience have any discussion on anything not on the agenda?
Mr. Chair, before you go in, can you please seat Mr. Kaufman?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes.
what I was gonna say.
We'll seat Mr. Kaufman. Second time, anybody in the public have any comments not on the agenda? One more time, anything not on the agenda? Excellent. Correspondence. I guess we can save this. Do you want to just discuss this after as part of the?
That's part of an application.
Okay. All right, I have nothing else. Approval of minutes for February 20th, 2024.
I move to approve the minutes of February 20th, 2024.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. I do have a note here that it is the, from the meeting minutes, there is missing the vote on the public hearing for tonight. Back page number 4, item 14, applications received. It doesn't note that there was a vote, which was moved by myself and seconded by Dylan, with 7 in favor, and that was unanimous. So that should be added to the agenda.
So, motion to approve as amended.
Second.
Okay. I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Roll call?
Kevin Zorda.
Yes.
Virginia Higley, yes. Kelly Hemler.
Yes.
Dylan Bridge.
Yes.
Nancy Martin.
Yes.
Ann Collins.
Yes.
Ken Kaufman.
Yes.
7 in favor, none against. The motion passes. Town attorney report. We did receive the town attorney report dated February 29th. And that is in the record. We have no continued public hearings. I'd like to have a motion to move the new business, the XIW number 2401 Arbor Road, Potter Ridge Road, and Webster Road, moved up to before the new public hearing so that they can get through that.
Yeah, so moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Sensing none, roll call.
Kevin Zorda.
Yes.
Virginia Higley, yes. Kelly Hemler.
Yes.
Dylan Bridge.
Yes.
Nancy Martin.
Yes.
Ann Collins.
Yes.
Ken Kaufman.
Yes.
7 in favor, none against. The motion passes, and we'll bring them up now.
Good evening.
Good evening. Just state your name and
I'm
address
John
for the record.
Cabivo. I'm your assistant town engineer. With me here is Bill Anderson from VHB, the design consultant that worked on this project. We're here to talk about, as you see on the screen there, Arbor Road, Powder Ridge Road, and Webster Road. They're under the road referendum program. So more specifically, there's one crossing here of Terry Brook on Arbor Road, which is where the regulated, the work is in regulated area. Let's see here. Okay. These are who are involved. JP Rodriguez is the lead engineer on this. He's not here this evening. There's really no impacts to wetlands. We're working on the road that's over the brook. We got turf establishment that we're going to be doing in the graded areas, water quality. We're making some improvements on the existing drainage in this in the program. We'll have erosion control measures with the catch basins, and there'll be no fill within the floodplain for Terry Brook. I'm assuming you received copies of the plans, so you saw details on the silt sacks for all the drainage basins. Also, you'll see a detail on there for catch basin trap and some silt fencing. And then, of course, on all street drains, we standard put the stickers on there showing no dumping because it drains to water course. This is the area Arbor Road where Terry Brook passes under. You see the street drains there. In total on this project, and actually when we do road projects, we're looking to reduce the amount of impervious area. This area is the Green Manorville area. These are actually the last two streets that we haven't worked on in the last 25 years.
Wow.
What we've done in this area, in accordance with a plan that was approved by council, is on most of these streets, we've eliminated sidewalks on one side. The other thing you notice in this photo is there is no snow shelf. There's no grass strip between the sidewalk and the edge of the road. So what we typically do on these is we remove the sidewalk on one side and we shift the road over to create a snow shelf, because sidewalk without a snow shelf, we all know if we've cleared a sidewalk before and there's no place to put the snow, it's a problem because the plow trucks come by and half the road is on your sidewalk. So that's one of the changes that we've done on all of these streets in this area. The other thing is we give the roads what we call a road diet. We narrow them down. These are 30-foot wide streets. They'll be going down to 26 feet. So in all, even though we're not touching the brook or anything, we're reducing impervious area. There's a couple of reasons we do this. One of the other reasons is the town has a drainage permit with the state. It's called MS4, and the state looks for us to reduce impervious area for town facilities, and this is one of the ways that we do that. We try to achieve that. Let's see here. This I talked about the narrowing of the road. This is the cross section here, and we also looked at the culvert that carries Terry Brook under Arbor Road. It's in good condition. It's a concrete pipe, which is good news. So we don't need to really do anything outside of the box out for the road and the sidewalks, which I'm going to go back and you can see there is a grass shelf behind the sidewalk. So all the work we're doing is within the area that has either sidewalks or pavement. Let's see here. This is a plan view. We've showed both plans because within the regulated area, we see on here Willard Drive. That is south of the brook. It encompasses that. The road profile is basically staying the same. We're not changing anything there. And then this is the area you can see. You can see the culvert in a large dashed line there. You'll also see the drainage. We are replacing that drainage, and the last catch basin before it goes to outlet into that culvert is a 4-foot sump with a hood, which is standard required through wetlands, if I'm not mistaken. So that's basically why we're here this evening. Again, that the center line is not changing for the road. And with that, I will open it up for questions if you have any.
Any questions? To my left, anybody?
Nope.
To my right?
No question.
Anything? Did you want to add anything?
So this is a pretty straightforward roadway reconstruction project. We've seen similar ones in the past. The only difference is that they are requesting an agent approval for very minor disturbances in the upland. As Mr. Cabibbo has stated, they're not doing anything in the culvert area. There's no flood zones associated with any of the other locations, just minor escarpment locations that you can see on our GIS, which are previously disturbed by the subdivisions in this neighborhood and the existing roadway system. And I have no departmental concerns, although traffic had one comment about posting speed limit signs. But other than that, no comments, and I have no recommended site specifics.
Excellent. All right. Would anybody like to make a motion?
I make a motion to approve XIW 24-01 Arbor Road, Powder Ridge Road, and Webster Road application for an agent approval request for roadway improvements and reconstruction as part of the Enfield Roads 2021 Year 3 Hazardville West Project, Town of Enfield applicant owner.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Anybody to the left? Anybody to my right? No discussion. Roll call?
Kevin Zorda?
Yes.
Virginia Higley, yes. Kelly Hemler?
Yes.
Dylan Bridge?
Yes.
Nancy Martin?
Yes.
Ann Collins?
Yes.
Ken Kaufman?
Yes.
7 in favor, none against. The motion passes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Appreciate your consideration and your time
Appreciate it.
and changing us on the agenda.
No worries.
Thank you.
Excellent. Georgie, the list. All right, we will move on to new public hearings. We have IW number 696, 85, and 100 Bright Meadow Boulevard, and 113 Brainerd Road. All by yourself?
No. A few friends, I guess I'll say. Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. My name is Carl Landolina, represent the applicant in these proceedings. I'm joined by the applicant, as you know, is Fast Track Realty. We're here with the written permission of the owners of all three parcels, one being Mass Mutual and the other one being the Ferrara family. It owns part of the property as well. I'm joined by Mr. John Furman to my right. He's a principal at VHB Engineering. He's our project engineer. I think you probably know Andy Borgia, who's the principal of Fast Track Realty. I know you all know George Logan in the back from REMA Ecological, our soil scientist. And in case you have any questions on the fields that we intend to construct on the property, we're joined by Alan Hubbard, who's here with the Athletic Fields of America. They're going to be supplying the material for the soccer fields. So as you are all probably aware, this is three parcels.
All right, let me go through the rules of the public hearing.
Sure.
Then we'll open that, then you can go into
Okay.
your kind of
Fine.
presentation
Yep.
first, all right? So the rules for the public hearing, the applicant will give the statements about the application. Afterwards, the agent and staff may ask questions and comments. We will then hear statements from the public only regarding the topic of the public hearing and areas of concern for the inland wetlands and our regulations only. Please do not bring up any items related to other agencies, commissions such as P&Z, as we can only base our discussions on our rules and regulations. All those wishing to speak, when called on, you must state your name and address for the record. Depending on the number of people wishing to speak, the chair may set a time limit. If at any time the hearing becomes unruly or unmanageable, the chair can call a recess. The statements from the public are for the purpose to be considered in deliberations of the regular meeting. No back and forth discussions will take place. We will then hear statements from the applicant to address any questions or concerns that was heard from the public. The applicant needs to provide a document of notices sent to all abutting properties, certified mail, no more than 15 days prior and no less than 10 days prior to the day of hearing. Okay, has this been given to the staff? Do you have those?
Yes, that is a letter that we received this morning via email from Jessica Baldwin from Connecticut Water, just requesting that the public hearing remain open to the 19th, so she may submit more detailed comments, just because they don't have enough time currently for today.
Thank you. And then the secretary will read the legal ad? Do you have the read? Do you have the illegal ad by chance?
Yes, hang on.
It's in the packet.
The Enfield Inland Wetlands and Watercourse Agency will hold a public hearing at their regular meeting of Tuesday, March 5th, 2024, at 7 p.m. in the Town Hall Council Chambers, 820 Enfield Street, Enfield CT, considering the following applications: IW 696, 85, and 100 Bright Meadow Boulevard, and 113 Brainerd Road. Application for wetlands permit for regulated activities in connection with the development of a sports complex and associated uses. Fast Track Realty applicant, Mass Mutual Life Insurance Company, owners of 85 and 100 Bright Meadow Boulevard, and John R. and Patricia C. Fiera, owners of 113 Brainerd Road. Maps 35, lots 44 and 220, and map 36, lot 237, BR and R33 zones. These are published in the JI on Friday, February 23rd, and Friday, March 1st. The applicant has met all their public hearing requirements.
Excellent, thank you. All right, so if I could have a motion to open the public hearing?
I move to open the public hearing.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Sensing none, roll call, please.
Kevin Zorda.
Yes.
Virginia Higley, yes. Kelly Hemler.
Yes.
Dylan Bridge.
Yes.
Nancy Martin.
Yes.
Ann Collins.
Yes.
Ken Kaufman.
Yes.
7-4, and we have opened the public hearing. All right,
Thank you, Mr.
You're on
Chairman.
again.
All right, again, once for the record, Carl Landolina, representing the applicant Fast Track Realty, and rather than introduce everyone again,
go
I'll
ahead.
just tell you that you can incorporate my remarks into the record at this point. I know, I'm sure that the commission is very interested in hearing the details of this project, so rather than listen to me drone on, I'm just going to invite George Logan up here, and he can introduce the project to you, and then any questions you may have, I think, can be answered by the folks that we have present. If you don't mind, I'm going to, oh, the chair's already up there.
Carl, I thought that John was going to.
You want to go, John? John wants to go first? Okay. John Furman from VHB will go first then.
Good evening.
good evening.
For the record, John Furman. I'm the office manager and engineer of record for this project, and I'm from VHB's Springfield office. Are our plans somewhere? Can I have that? This one?
Yeah, my limited means there already. Escape, yeah.
And just go down to the computer and look over the file folder. There you go.
No, that's my stuff.
Are the
You're
overall
looking for the
site plans that
plans.
we submitted on Drive here?
No.
Or is this just the stuff?
You did not tell me one of the site plans up there, so I only included
have
what
an
you
overall
emailed.
Okay. Which plan kind of gets us the most way?
There's only one
to go
plan.
I don't know if they did it on the flash drive. Wait.
This one?
That one? Yeah, that's 6 as a plan. No, not
Okay.
that, the one above it.
Let's just start with this one.
Let's start with this.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
There we go.
Thank you. I was going to say.
The commission should have a set of plans. We made a full submittal for the project. What we are looking at, I'll just provide a general overview of the project itself, and then I'll turn it over to George, who can actually discuss the environmental impacts of the project. So the biggest piece of property that we are looking at is 100 Bright Meadow Boulevard, owned by Mass Mutual. That is 69 acres. There is a small parcel also owned by Mass Mutual, and it is up in this corner here. It is a very tiny parcel. It's kind of landlocked. It's a 0.38 acres. And then we have the parcel on Brainerd Road, which is the farm, and that's right here. So in total, we have 68.9 acres that we are looking at for this development. It is an unusual project. Most of the ones that come before the commission are ones where we're talking about land and we're looking at building a parking lot or a building, and we're increasing the amount of impervious area that is associated with that land parcel. We are doing just the opposite. We are basically taking this mass of parking areas that are here that I'm outlining right now, and we're removing them, and we are turning them into athletic fields. At the end of the day, when we remove these fields and we build a new building on the side of the garage, which I'll talk about, we'll have a 1.7 acre reduction in impervious area, which brings with it an associated reduction in the amount of stormwater runoff from the property. It's not something that you normally would see. Normally you would see an increase. This has a lot of advantages to this project itself. In general, the development consists of a number of issues, and it's basically going to be an all-sports village. The intent of the project is to create a venue for various sports activities to be to visit here and to basically play sports. In this area here, where the parking areas are, we are proposing 11 soccer fields. Within the existing building, it's going to be repurposed. We're looking at a significant portion of that building being used for hotel rooms, hotel purposes to support the venue. There's also a restaurant that's being proposed, and then a family entertainment and retail portion of that building. So this building itself will be 100% repurposed and refurbished as part of this. Going to the
So apparently, the plans are in the folder before this, so if you back out. So where should we go?
back one folder. Right there. Just figured that when I got upstairs.
Thanks,
There we go. Thank you, Georgie. All right. I no longer have to do hand puppets. All right, I'm just making that a little smaller. So again, you got a great view of the project from that aerial photo. So this is the actual overall plan. It's a key map. You can see the configuration of the 11 soccer fields. Here is the existing building I just was through talking about: hotel, restaurant, family entertainment, retail, all within that building. To the south of this building here, we have a project associated with it. Is we're constructing a new parking lot that is for 200 vehicles. Part of that is that there's a Mass Mutual had added a data center to the back of the building, and there are generators here. That will all be removed as part of this project to make room for this hotel. And then the last piece of it is the shaded area here, which is the construction of an indoor basketball facility. So there will be basketball courts in there, pickleball court, and some general items that support that. The project itself, we've analyzed it for the majority of the project is for stormwater. We have created a stormwater model for the project and all of the areas that are basically affected by the project and our limit of work, which basically kind of focuses around this area. As I had mentioned, it is a very unusual project in that we don't often have a project where we really don't have to do anything to mitigate an increase in stormwater runoff. So I just have, if you have the stormwater management manual that we prepared available to you, it's about this thick. The first 20 or so pages are really of what is easily understandable. The rest of it is engineering data to back up those first 20 pages. If you find your way to Table 3, Table 3 has a summary of the differences between the existing and the proposed stormwater. And I'll just read a couple of them off for the record here. So we analyzed 5 design storms. We analyzed the 2, the 10, the 25, the 50, and the 100. So for, and I'll just give a couple. So for the 2-year storm, which is the smallest storm that we analyzed, the existing flow from our project area is 35.7 cubic feet per second. After development, after this program is built and the stormwater management is in place, that reduces to 25 cubic feet per second. So just the fact of building this, we're reducing the flow from the property by about 10 cubic feet per second. I'll go to the middle row. I'll go to 25-year design storm. On the 25-year design storm, the existing flow from our project area is 88 cubic feet per second, and the proposed is 68 cubic feet per second. So as we get into the higher storms, the difference between existing and proposed increases, meaning we're actually holding and reducing the flow of water more as we get into the higher storms. So there's a lot of benefits to this project. George will talk about all the environmental impacts of what we're looking at. We have, I think I've covered the actual program, the projects that we're looking at, the areas and the impact and the spaces. So that in general is an overview of the project from the engineering side. I'm just going to take a back seat and let George talk about the environmental pieces and what you folks are interested in.
Can we switch?
Yeah.
Oops. Good evening, everyone. George Logan for the record, Principal Environmental Scientist with REMA Ecological Services. And we're going to go back. Is that batch 1?
I'm going to go back.
Okay, so you see batch 1. There you go. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I have a series of exhibits that I'm going to go through for you. They're all in the report. There's a report that's a wetlands assessment, summary of findings, which was, hopefully you all have copies of that. There's also another report, which is a standalone, which is the soil wetland delineation report. And we'll go through some of the exhibits so you can familiarize yourself with what we have as far as the resources on this project. So again, this was the overview that you saw, 2022 aerial photographs. It's pretty recent. You can see the mass of impervious surfaces. You can see the garage here. What you see on the north side of the property that we'll discuss is, we'll call that a wetland B, which you can see because you can see the exposed water. And the reason you see the exposed water is because we have 2 beaver dams that have been there for a while, which have, should we say, impacted and changed the character of that particular wetland. Moving on, just to first go about the wetland delineations. The wetland delineations were done by 2 qualified soil scientists. Wetland A, which you see there, was done by me. And the rest of the wetland delineations which were this other bluish area, were done by a very good friend and colleague of mine named Jim McManus. So I delineated wetland A, and then I proceeded to verify everything that you see that's facing us, facing the project, to make sure that that delineation was correct, so I verified it and called it substantially correct. Now, you will see there on this particular map that there are some indications of some wetland impacts that we're proposing. I'll go back to those, and so I have another exhibit for that as we go on with the presentation. So now I have to go to the second one. So, boy, I think I need new glasses. One thing that I keep forgetting that you folks know me, but the audience might not, so I just got to give you my qualifications a little bit. So I hold a master's degree in natural resources science. My concentration is in conservation biology and wetlands and wildlife. I have several certifications as a wetland scientist, soil scientist, a wildlife biologist, and also as a senior ecologist through certifications. For instance, that one is from the Ecological Society of America, and I've been practicing in this field since 1988. Maybe I'll retire someday. Who knows? We'll see. So the first thing I wanted to do is to kind of go back a little bit in time and see the project or the project area when it was not what's there today. So the first aerial photograph that I showed you here is from 1965. What is prominent on the north is Waterworks Brook. You'll see that in every of the, and you have that in the report also. Let me point out, this is the church down here, Brainerd Road, Street, or Road, right? Right. And of course, I-91. And you see at that time that this project was basically agricultural fields. And some of them look a little wet, and I'll get into that as we go along. Now, this is interesting, and you're not going to find this one exactly in the report because care of Georgie, who provided some very interesting information earlier on today, which I much appreciate because that kind of makes my job a little easier. What you see in the gray is the aerial photograph in 1970. Again, nothing's going on the site, at least from a development point of view. But you see all these drainage patterns, which are obvious. Now, back in 1982, I believe, before there was anything that was proposed on the site, there was an application, and my old boss, Ken Stevens from Soil Science Environmental Services, this is how I started my career, was out here delineating wetlands, and he produced a sketch map. And these are the wetlands that roughly he delineated. And these are sketch maps. These are not obviously delineations, so they're roughly positioned by me to kind of emulate more or less the sketch that he had produced that I saw and the information that Georgia provided. So we had one wetland that you don't see here, which is number 4, and that's the one up here. But these are the other wetlands, 1, 2, 3, and 5. The reason for the yellow is that all those 3 wetlands that you see there were to be impacted to a certain point or entirely by that application that came in 1982 before this commission. Number 3 is the one that we'll have a lot of discussion on, and that is Wetland A, which we're proposing to fill in its entirety. So what you see is these drainage, and these are old agricultural fields. You can kind of see the furrows through here where the tractor got a little stuck maybe because it's a little wetter. And you see the drainage patterns going all the way down to Waterworks Brook. Fast forward from 1970 to 1986, and you see one of the first phases of the development by Mass Mutual. The first building was put in. The road at that configuration at that time, that has been expanded since. And you can see that the first large parking lot was put in. There's a subsequent that you'll see in another photograph. Now, the area that we'll call Wetland A, is in this general location. And here you also see a ditch that was probably put in there to start to drain some of these areas. And now we fast forward to 1990, and what you see is that there's the secondary large phase. The building is expanded twice again. There's another parking lot in here. You can still see this area that we're calling where wetland A is going to be, which expands from here to there. And I'll explain what happened to wetland A and how it was utilized by the development over the years. So let's go now to, here we go. So batch number 3, some additional aerial photographs. So here's one more phase of development. You can see here, this is the grading that was happening for the garage structure. This is a 2004 aerial photograph. They were bursting at the seams, I guess, at that time, and they needed additional parking. And so that's what you see here. Now, this is a 2006 aerial photograph, and the reason for this is to show you that all the work that they were doing with the parking lots were what they use wetland A or whatever was there that we would call wetland A. They basically used it as a glorified detention water quality basin. There was a portion of, and I'll show it to you, of wetland A that was sort of super excavated and depressed, or at least kind of formed to be sort of the last little part before the water was siphoned out of that wetland to the stormwater drainage system. But this outline that you see here is, and exists today in a similar form, is a large patch, large enough, of the invasive Phragmites, the common reed, which we all know is an undesirable plant. That wasn't there before, but because of the fact that they were putting all their, or a large proportion of their stormwater from the parking lots to this area, it had changed the character of this area. Now, the first, and you'll see some photographs that I will provide, the first discharge is in this general location. So you can see that the Phragmites expanded down gradient, if you will, into this wet area. Here we're going forward to a 2005 aerial photograph, so just not too, well, this is the 2016. You saw the 04 when they were doing the garage. You can see the garage up here in the top where it's kind of still being finished. And you also see another phase of development, which is they're taking an additional portion of the site and expanding for more parking. And you can see all the probably construction equipment and whatnot for the garage or whatever else is going on. But one of the things you might see is that there's a strip of bare land right along here, and it goes all the way. And if it was a way to go in a little closer here, what you will see is that they actually graded into this area, which is now a delineated wetland. So not only were they discharging water, but I guess they put a new pipe or something to bring that portion of the parking lot there. And again, there was an additional disturbance into that wet area that we've delineated. Okay, now let's go to batch number 4. Oh, they're at the top. Oh, boy. My wife tells me I have to go back to get my eyes examined. So these are a series of photographs. I'm just going to go quickly through them. You will see that this particular photograph was taken on March 20th, 2023. That wasn't by me. That was by James McManus of J&M Wetland Consulting Services, who I called. As I said, we're very friendly with each other. We do work for each other, help each other. And so he provided a whole bunch of aerial photographs when they did their general review of the land. So in this particular case, the main building is in the back, and this is sort of a drainage ditch, or we even call it maybe a watercourse, but it's mostly of a ditch, where the water's going towards the end of this wetland A, where, as I said, it's been formed as sort of a detention basin. On the far side of the wetland, sort of the wetland A, which is the northeastern section, the wetland delineation goes out into this little wet meadow, which has been mowed annually, if not twice annually, for a long, long time. Wetland A, this is the southeastern portion, was the transition between a shrub, emergent wetland and a sort of a young forested. The wetland boundary is right about where these trees are. You can see the sort of the wetness here. So there's 3 cover types: emergent, including the common reed, the Phragmites, a jungle of shrub, and vine tangles, and then some young woods, which have developed over the years. What's interesting, which a little bit speaks on the disturbance that has happened in the past, in the transition nature of this wetland, at least a portion of it is on the eastern side. It transitions, it's fairly flat, and it goes from poorly drained to moderately well drained, so upland soils. And this is within the wetland that you see. And the forest floor plants are predominantly upland type. They're not wetland type. And I have a close-up picture, and this is just one area, but there's a lot of like enchanter's nightshade and things like that, poison ivy. And this is a big mess of the Asiatic bittersweet. Everyone knows that as a vine, but it can grow as a ground cover. And that's an upland species, and again, it bespeaks to the very transitional nature of this portion of this wetland. You can see the Phragmites patch in the back there. I'm looking sort of in a northerly direction. I might be wrong. Could be actually in southwest. Anyhow, there's a portion of the wetland which has developed into a kind of an alder willow thicket. And the reason for the alder willow thicket is that, as you probably have heard before, one of the things that alders do is they fix their own nitrogen. They take atmospheric nitrogen. They have nodules in their roots, so they can basically take off and exclude everything else. So you have an alder thicket here. You can see the frag patch. This is on the western side of the wetland, which comes right up to the grass. The wetland delineation is right along here, and that's the northern portion of the frag patch, which comes along. There's my car down there. Shrub, again, it's almost impenetrable. And the reason is not because thickets of shrubs, but it's also tangles of Asiatic bittersweet, multiflora rose, foxgrape, and there's a couple of flags that I basically had to guesstimate. I wasn't going in there. Like, okay, it's about there. So they had to actually do offsets for a couple of flags for me to get in there. Again, this is the end of the wetland A as the water leaves. You can see, again, similar picture where you saw before. And this is facing the other way, so the water's coming towards me. This is the top of the wetlands, so the southern portion, where the discharge from, I believe, is a 12-inch RCP, takes a portion of the parking lot, which is some of the old parking lot, and then the newer one that you see that have been developed at the last phase. And then this is the other discharge. This is an 18-inch RCP that takes a whole bunch of the parking lot and brings it into this wetland that they've basically used as a detention / water quality basin for a long time, from taking care of the water that was coming off the parking lots. And this is the outlet. And again, this is a 36-inch RCP. And from here, it gets into the drainage system of Bright Meadow Boulevard as it comes through, and travels through pipes about 900 feet, and then it goes into a swale, and then it goes down to a wetland that connects to Waterworks Brook just before it goes under the roadways and the highway. This again is a picture that was taken by my colleague Jim, and this is the large CMP that conveys Waterworks Brook under Bright Meadow Boulevard. So I'm looking kind of in a southerly direction. Boulevard is on my right. Again, another picture taken by Mr. McManus at the time that he was there in March. And you're not going to see this now, but what you saw there was the effect of the beaver dams, which had flooded this area. So there's two beaver dams. One is a little higher, one's a little lower. The one that's higher is older by probably close to a decade, and this one is a little newer, maybe 5 or 6 years. And what it's created is what we call a green tree reservoir. I don't know why they call that, because all the trees are not green anymore, they're dead. It basically flooded it out. Often they do that for waterfowl. They create an area for the waterfowl to come in for hunters. Okay, so this is Wetland B. So Wetland B, which is the Waterworks Brook Complex, has two components. It has the one that's associated with the riparian area, which is low in the landscape, and it has another stream that comes into it, and I'll show you a picture of that again. And then it has these seepage areas that are slightly higher into the landscape. And here's one. And what happens there is, you probably know, in these soil types, you have sort of a mix of awash, sands and gravels. Usually it's a cap. And then below that, you have the glacial lacustrine soils, these silty clays. Some of them are varved, if you've seen them. Enfield has plenty of them. Suffield, and goes all the way down the valley. So what happens is the water goes through the sands, hits this more impervious layer, or slightly less impervious, and the water kind of rides out and then pops out where there's a discharge on a hillside. So you have a few of those, and you've seen these little tongues that come up. And now this is the actual top dam. This is the older beaver dam, and you can see the newer one down there. This is, again, the top one. So I'm almost off the property at this point, almost going into the Connecticut Water Company land. And this older beaver dam has basically flooded out the forest a long time ago, so everything's gone. All the trees are gone because it's been there a longer time. You see another frag patch down there just above where the beaver dam is. And my understanding is and here's a closer picture of the beaver dam, this upper one. Flood here, beaver dam there, not flooding there, but then the flooding continues lower down. My understanding is the beavers have been removed, because one of the problems was that all the debris would come in and start clogging that large pipe that you see. During storms, things would basically be released, and that was an issue. So the town has taken the beavers out. Here is another one of those seasonal forested seepage areas that was taken in November, and that reddish hue, orange hue that you see, is just basically a sea of Japanese barberry, which is another invasive species. And that's something that we'll speak about a little later as part of some of our mitigation efforts. And here you see a picture of those tight glacial lacustrine soils that are within these seepage areas. I told you that there was a secondary tributary, which is sort of semi-perennial, if you will, maybe not exactly intermittent, and it spans it comes right along the property edge between Brainerd Park and this property, and then goes all the way down to Waterworks. And as you can see, it has eroded. There's been significant flows through here over the years, so it has eroded the banks. Another hillside seep area. Another hillside seep area. More. There's some nice upland areas that have survived that don't even have a lot of invasives. Oaks, hickories, maples. And there's a few spots of those, and those we're going to talk about those as potential mitigation and conservation. Here's another one, again, free of, for the most part, of invasives. And then if you go to the bottom of Waterworks before it goes under the boulevard, you see the second Beaver Dam, and you can see what has happened here. I mean, these are the large pieces of debris that if a big storm comes by, they get lifted up and they clog the big CMP or start clogging it. This is the actual Beaver Dam here. And then you can look down towards Boulevard and you can see some significant deposits of sand because of the erosion that has happened on that secondary brook that we talked about. All right, so now I'm going to go to, so that was number 4. I got 2 more. Oh boy, here we go. All right. I want 5. All right, here we go back to this picture that I showed you earlier. With the blue part is wetland B, and that's the more or less the on-site portion. Then you have a little bit that's up towards the hotel area, and then you see the tributary on the right side, and wetland A does have a little upland island in here. And so one of the things that we wanted to do, which is typical, is to do a functions and value analyses, looking at all the 13 functions and values that we typically look at. All of us now, soil scientists, wetland scientists, utilize the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers descriptive method, which is the bona fide, qualified methodology that we all use. Federal government uses it, we use it, the state does. And so one of the things that I wanted to show you is that wetland B goes off-site. So even though we have about 6+ acres of wetland B on our said property, we have other portions that extend out. So here's one on Brainerd Park. It's a continuation. And here is a whole bunch more going uphill. And this is the Connecticut Water Company land. And you can see one of their wells here, for instance. You can see the swath that goes out to the wellhead. So these are an extensive wetland. Of course, the watershed is much larger than that. It goes quite a ways up. So it's extensive watershed. And here's the part outside of our property. Again, that's what I've highlighted on the hotel property to the north. And so here's the summary, if you will, of wetland functions and values. You can see them on the left. As you know, functions are ones that are intrinsic to the wetlands, which means whether we're there or not, they're there. But values are the ones that we derive as society. So, for instance, flood flow alteration. Well, the beavers are trying to do the job, but we care more than the beavers do. But wildlife habitat obviously is a function because that's there whether we're there or not. And you can see the wetland A, and by the way, in the back of the report, usually I just give you the summary, but I think it was important enough this time to run you through so you can see the rationales. So in the back, there's about 18 pages of rationales for wetland assessment, where I go through each one of the rationales, that all the questions that are asked, and you can see, and then I can come up with a conclusion whether this is a primary function, which means it's there and it's robust, or it's a secondary function, it's there, but it's really not as robust. Or maybe the function is not even there or appreciably there. And you can see the wetland B has, it's counted 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 6 principal functions, and which is what you would expect for groundwater recharge, discharge. We talked about hillside wetlands. The sediment toxic and pathogen retention, obviously that's a value. It's principal because of the capacity of this wetland to absorb, transform, retain whatever's coming in from the watershed. And the watershed does have some urbanization, especially the upper portion of the watershed. So it's not what you saw in the aerials that I showed you where it looks nice and pristine. There's subdivisions higher up which are bringing pollutants and constituents through this corridor. So wetland A, there are no principal functions, in my professional opinion, and a few of them not even there. And so it's limited. Now, from the things that were provided by your staff, which I looked at today, back in 2005, I believe, a second soil scientist came and delineated the wetlands, and that was Mr. Dean Gustafson. He's probably been before you. He used to work for VHB. Now he's part of his own company. And he described this particular wetland, Wetland A, and at that time was called Wetland 2. And he says this: it's an isolated wetland system that is approximately 2.3 acres in size. We delineated 2.45 or 8, I believe, so it's a little larger. The majority of which was enhanced and created during the construction of the existing building and parking lots on site, which is interesting. So my understanding, and I didn't get the data, but I've heard it, that it's true, that they try to basically enhance and create this wetland, make it larger, and form it in a way that it was going to do the detention, retention, and water quality functions. So it's a lot of man-made activity here. And this is the resulting wetland is currently in various developmental stages and supports several wetland types, including a wet meadow community, yes, a small shrub swamp stands, they're much larger, and a young forested wetland along the eastern limit of the system, which is exactly right. The wetland discharges to the north via an intermittent watercourse. I call it more of a drainage ditch. The intermittent watercourse flows into the existing stormwater system for the site and daylights at wetland 3, just south of Waterworks Brook, which is basically what I told you. So the last thing is batch number 6, which is somewhere. Here we go. Boy. Okay. So as you've heard, in order for this project to work, or else it won't, and it's a matter of a socioeconomic also issue. And so when you look at feasible improvement and alternative analysis, it's a balancing act where you see what you gain and what you lose, and you look at the mitigation also. And the project would not work if we did not fill wetland A, which again is disturbed and has been enhanced or developed for the purpose that I mentioned before. So, but we did have some impacts on wetland B, especially some of these little seepage wetlands. And if you look at the application, what you see is that we called it 6,000 some to 6,000 to 7,000 square feet of disturbance. That was a mistake on my side. I forgot to mention one disturbance that was here on wetland E, and that brought the total to a little over 10,000 square feet. So we kind of looked at it and we said, this is not acceptable, especially because we're saying that this is the valuable wetland that has the high functions and values. So the decision was made, and then again, this is new to you folks, even though I did discuss it briefly with your staff when I brought the report in, is we reduced the width of the basketball building by 50 feet, made it 200 feet in width, and now the disturbance for these little areas that you see here, let's see if I can go a little closer, is a little over 2,000 square feet. So for instance, there was an impact here that's been eliminated. I guess there's that's okay, I can do it this way. We've got an impact here for 700 and some feet, 60. We got another wetland impact here, 641. And then if it lets me, we go that way. Oh, there we go. Interesting. Got another one here, there's a retaining wall for this field number 11. So we going to the expense to doing retaining wall on the north side and on the east side. So we've limited the amount of impacts. So again, this is the largest impacts, about 11 100 square feet, and this is 134. So we've reduced the impact substantially to wetland B, which is the more highly valuable wetland, especially as you get down into the riparian corridor itself. Now, usually when we look at impacts, we look at direct physical impacts to wetlands and watercourses. So we've talked about those, elimination of wetland A and then reduction of impacts to wetland B. And then we look at short-term and long-term indirect impacts. And the kinds of things we look at, from the short term, we look at erosion and sedimentation controls. We all realize, and I think this is kind of this particular, this is, again, from the state GIS, and sort of a erosion susceptibility, how susceptible are these soils. Obviously, the red is the highest risk, if you will, and if I can read my own lettering here, Category 1, highly erodible soil and coarse grain erodible superficial material. The orangey yellow is Category 2, highly erodible soil with finer grain erodible superficial materials. Yes, these are the glacial lacustrine soils. And then above that, we have a Category 3, which is erodible superficial material. So there's at least a moderate to moderate high susceptibility to erosion on these soils. So in order to make sure that we don't do something untoward during construction, the erosion sedimentation control plan has to be very robust, and it is. It not only meets the standards, but it goes a little beyond that, realizing that we have some finer grained soils here and that we're doing some cuts and fills. So it's not like you're on the grade, there's some cuts and fills. So that's one category, short term. On the long term perspective, the other two things that we look at is water quality. Are we maintaining water quality to the receiving waters, especially Waterworks Brook and that riparian system? And are we maintaining hydrology to these wetlands, such as the seepage areas that we talked about? Now, on the first category, as you heard before, we're reducing the impervious surfaces by 1.7 acres. But that's not the only part of the equation. The equation is that we're taking dirty parking lots and taking them away. And so think of all that water that was really not properly treated except what was going through wetland A. That was doing the yeoman's job. But now that is no longer necessary. And so we have 11 fields that are not producing the kinds of pollution that we would associate with parking lots, such as hydrocarbons and heavy metals and things like that. So that's a plus. Now, that's from a water quality perspective. From a hydrology perspective, we don't want to starve wetlands. So we're not starving wetlands, except there's one little category, and this is something we've discussed internally that we can fix, and that is that we're putting a building on top of an area that's providing water for the seepage wetlands. So we need to take a little portion of that building and do a water budget and put some of that water at the edge of these areas, particularly this one. I'm not so much concerned about these others because we have some other things that are going on here as far as, I guess this is an intensive map, so it takes a little while. You know what's going on? I figured it out. I have too many things open, right, Georgie? That's what it is. All right, so here we go. So we need to take a little bit of this building and put it here. There's the edge of the wetland that you see here. So in order to, and that's something that can be easily done. All right, now you're probably wondering about the green areas. So mitigation. So usually what we like to do, as you probably expect, is for us to do some kind of a mitigation. And the usual thing that we do is an in-kind mitigation. So if we take an acre of wetlands away, we want to put an acre of wetlands back at a minimum. Unfortunately, there's not many opportunities to do that in this site. The areas that are upland are actually areas that we want to preserve, such as the ones that are down here that I talked about. There's some nice forests. And there's about 12 to 14 acres of nice upland and the wetlands associated with it that would go into a conservation easement. So that's sort of a preservation part, conservation part. So what can we do? Well, we discussed of bringing back those portions of wetland B that have been compromised by beavers. Now, how have they been compromised by beavers? So obviously there was a forest there, and both the upper and the lower beaver ponds, and those basically have been killed off. And you say, okay, well, that's okay, so there's other things that have come in. But what happens is because of the inundation that's year-round, the vegetative diversity basically plummets in those areas. And you have some things on the edges, and because of disturbance, that actually attracts invasive species also, such as the Phragmites, because of the soil, and also the erosion from the brook. Anytime you have exposed soil, that's like ready media for invasive species to proliferate. So by removing sections of the beaver dams and letting the water course to reconstitute itself, there's going to be a reflourishing of a wet meadow at first, and then other things will come in, scrub, shrub, and because the seed bank is there. Believe it or not, even though it's flooded, it is there, so it will come back up. What's there now along the edges, because there's a seasonal variation to the beaver ponds, especially in the summer comes down, the beaver ponds go down, and then the beavers try to figure out what to do about that. So all around the edges, you have annuals. So when I was out there, what you saw for the most part is one species, and that's rice cut grass. And you know rice cut grass because it really cuts. If you grab it, you'll know it. But that's a no-key plant. It's got some wildlife value, but it's just one species. So by removing those notches for those two beaver bed dams, over time, you reconstitute the diversity, floristic diversity, and of course habitat for those areas. Another thing that we can do, as you notice in one of those photographs, we have invasive species. For the most part, we've got Japanese barberry. Also, we have another interesting infestation, which is one of the first ones I've seen in Connecticut, on the hillsides in the moist areas, not so much in the more droughty areas, which is the nice forest. We have common hawthorn that's kind of hybridized, I think, with another species like Washington hawthorn, and it's taken off. It's not considered invasive species yet, although it is invasive in some states. So the idea would be to take Japanese barberry out, take some of the hawthorn out, take multiflora rose out, and there's a bunch of other species out, common buckthorn and garlic mustard, things of that nature, and choose a total of at least a minimum of 1 acre, which we wouldn't identify now, because depending on when this project will go forth, if it went forth, that will be the time for me to go back there and identify those areas, because things are dynamic, so we want the bang for our buck for those areas. And we would remove these species, and we would remove them mechanically. No pesticides or herbicides. Japanese barberry in particular does very well just by mechanical. You cut the brush at the base, at the surface of the ground. You use a weed wrench, take them out. Not the big ones, because you don't want to create an erosional problem. And believe it or not, they don't come back. And there's been some demonstration projects around Connecticut to show that that's exactly the case. I actually lit it in my backyard when I first bought our house. No Japanese barberry. I'm still struggling with his added bittersweet, but that's another another species. So we have the beaver dams, we have that particular removal of invasives. And then when I was reading Georgie's memo, which is still in process this morning, she mentioned, well, why don't you see if you can do some mitigation and enhancement of wetland E. This is this one over here. It's possible, but as I started looking at it, I realized that when we pulled the building back from 250 feet width to 200 feet width, we're leaving this grassy open area. You can see it in the aerial photograph that was associated with the old nursery, or daycare center, I should say. So this is an area that we can do a couple of things. We can create a wetland, and you're like, how you create a wetland on a slope? There are ways. You basically step things. And then we can also enhance this area here, which is infested with invasives because it's right at the edge, and it's pretty dense, and you can see that. So there are some opportunities, and there might be others scattered around the site where we can do some other things. But that's what we can do on the site. So this is pretty much the end of my presentation, and we'll be opening it up for questions. Thank you for bearing with me.
Anything else from anybody on your?
No, not at this time.
Thank you. All right, Georgie, you want to make some comments?
Yes. Before I get into my primary questions, I just want to go back to figure the alternatives plan George had up on the screen for batch 6, I think it was.
This.
Yes, that one. So I am very confused about this sheet. I believe we left off in conversation via email that you were considering a concept plan to reduce the size of the basketball building. Mm-hmm. Is that what this plan is?
That is correct.
Okay. So I never got copies of this plan to give to the commission, and I never had it included in an updated feasible and prudent alternatives report. So this is all new information that should have been sent to us before tonight's hearing. That way it could have been uploaded to our website for the public and given to our commission members. So that was the first question I had. I think it would be beneficial to provide some more beaver pond clarification on those locations. Your report mentions that one has been previously removed, and then it mentions again that both are remaining. It's a little bit difficult to distinguish which exact beaver dam you are referring to and which ones are off-site and which ones are on-site. On your functions and values assessment table, you mentioned that wildlife habitat under wetland A is a yes, but I'm not sure which wildlife presence you saw while doing your delineation. Do you recall what was present at the time?
I didn't see much, so I'm doing it more as a habitat evaluation based on the cover types that are there, the vegetation that's there, the pluses or minuses, if you will. So there are no flooded areas, so I don't expect that there's going to be much as far as amphibian activity.
Well, you have,
Some.
I'm sorry, you have aquatic habitat in one category for fish and shellfish, and then wildlife habitat in the other. But from what I'm understanding from what you're saying, the habitat portion is strictly to the vegetation types, not necessarily wildlife critters and stuff like
Correct.
that.
So I didn't do a wildlife inventory. Obviously, it was the wrong season. So basically, if you look at the rationales, what the rationales allow you to do is to look through characteristics of habitat that allow you to evaluate the habitat quality, and based on that, you're able to determine, evaluate, so we speak. So, for instance, under wildlife habitat, it asks questions: is wetland not degraded by human activity? What's the water quality of the watercourse, if there is one, of the pond? Is wetland not fragmented by development? Upland surrounding of this wetland is undeveloped.
What page are you on?
This is page, it's a few pages into the rationales, so that's like 6.
Is that right after the sediment shoreline table?
Probably. It's actually after, yeah, exactly.
So this table I found a little bit difficult to interpret. You mentioned for present values, yes or no, and then principles for P. Were these supposed to be color-coded, or are they this is just what it looks like. It was hard to distinguish what you meant with this data in this table.
You mean this table or the?
Yeah.
Okay.
Like all these tables, they're just, so for example, just so I can explain what I was trying to interpret, you show the presence of yes and no values, and then you have principal for a P. So is it true to say that your present value is the same as basically saying yes?
All right, so when you go through the rationales, this is what I guess what Georgie is looking at right now. And it asks a series of questions. So for wildlife habitat, it asks 23 different questions. And so you check whether these are valid or not for each of the wetlands. And depending on your score, you can kind of determine, and that's where your professional subjectivity comes in. So if you have a lot of yeses, yes, then obviously that's a principal function. But if you don't, and you just have a few,
Dark ones are yes.
so the dark ones are yes. So
Well, then if you go down to this, one of the sediment shoreline stabilization tables, you have one as a no, but you have a box checked off showing it's present.
which one do I have as a no?
This is the one right after the wetland functions and
Oh,
values.
yeah, I get it. So, so the reason that sediment shoreline stabilization is basically no for wetland A is because there is not a presence of a water body or a watercourse, perennial watercourse. So the shoreline, sediment shoreline stabilization means if you have a watercourse and the shoreline is stable, it's a lot of good vegetation, that means that it protects the function of the watercourse itself. But since wetland A doesn't really have, it has that little drainage ditch that's maybe 50, 60 feet before the outlet, I wouldn't consider that a watercourse, then there is no really function, stabilization, sediment shoreline stabilization function.
Okay, so it's basically like a score sheet, and then depending on which assets are found, that's how you determine yes and no functions and what are principal or not.
So all the little squares that are shaded in means, yep, yes, I agree, that's there. Then depending on the question, so number 11 on wildlife habitat says dominant wetland class includes deep or shallow marsh and wooded swamp.
Okay.
Yeah, well, that's a no for a wetland A, it's a yes, obviously for wetland B. Thank you, beavers. So that's,
So I'm sorry, I'm going to interrupt for a second. So from a real novice perspective, which is me, I think your question is, there's three categories, right? Yes, P, right, primary,
You can see why it's confusing.
yes, and then an N. But we're talking about when going through the functions analysis, it's just yes and no. So is your question, how do I determine when they're present, which in the functions analysis is a yes, whether it's primary or secondary? Is that sort of your question?
Kinda not really. It's more so the basic interpretation of what the check boxes mean and how Mr. Logan came up with yes for present and no, when some of the no portions have boxes checked off, but it equal to no. Yeah, there's a couple. And then some of them have P for principal versus yes, and which I understand the difference. I just wanted to make sure I was interpreting this table correctly.
yeah. So the bottom where it says present, yes, no, or principal is, the final determination whenever you're looking at a particular
Got it.
function of
So-
value.
I guess,
So you tally them in almost in a sense.
so what is the tally mark for a function to be a yes versus a no?
It's somewhat subjective, obviously, because every question has a little different.
Is there a criteria sheet that you go by?
No, this is it, basically.
So it's just something that you use of your own expertise?
No, this is directly out of the Highway Methodology Workbook.
No, that's not what I meant. When you make your yes or no determinations.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I have to be as truthful as possible for each of these questions, but to answer the question, I have to say, okay, did I see that particular factor or habitat quality factor, whatever? Is this, do we have a high degree of interspersion of vegetation?
If you
Yes.
could, maybe for the next meeting, if you wouldn't mind providing a little explanation sheet, how to read this table, it might be a little bit more beneficial.
Maybe what I'll do is I'll give you the actual descriptive approach, which is a little handbook that's,
Yeah, usually we get something like that and it shows actual numbers.
Yeah.
This is, I will admit my arrogance here and I apologize, but this is the first time I've seen the highway methodology workbook. So trying to interpret this table at first glance without understanding the approach, it's very confusing because it's not color coded. It's hard to tell where you got your selections for present values versus what's there and what's not. But I think just having clarification going forward might be able to help us all better understand the exact functions and values that you found out there in the field.
okay. I did provide a little bit of a cheat sheet
I read it.
description. in the
Maybe helps
beginning of-
me 5%.
Yeah, I thought that would be helpful. But what I'll do for the next time, I'll bring you copies of the actual methodology itself, so you can see it. This is sort of my way of making it maybe a little
Here for you.
more concise, but it might be helpful for your staff and for you to see it from the horse's mouth, if you will.
That would be great. I really appreciate it.
Yep.
I have a couple more questions. I just want to clarify if the agency doesn't mind. So, off-site trails were mentioned in your report as a potential benefit of doing mitigation by wetland B. Those off-site trails, do you have a proposal of which parcels that would be on? This is important just because when you start doing things off-site, you start getting into the kind of the risky areas of another private property owner giving permission to have these trails or mitigation on their property. So since you mentioned that as part of your proposal, I was just curious to know more details about that trail and where they're located. Have you talked to the other property owners about any potential off-site mitigation, one including that trail? Is that trail a public trail? Is it a private trail? Is it for the parents that drop off the children while they're waiting for the games to go over? Just some basic information about that project could be very helpful.
Sure. I mean, to be honest with you, Georgie, some of this was from secondhand discussions that I've had.
Okay, no
with-
problem.
with
I understand
folks.
you're still in the...
Some of it is trails that are on Brainerd Park, which will connect here and extend. But that might need some further explanation because you do have a water course there, so it would have to be crossed somehow. So that would have to be developed.
And then depending on the trail, I'm just thinking like if you're implementing a trail in a wetland, wouldn't such implementation provide more disturbance to that wetland?
It depends.
Okay.
It would depend. So if it's, and what I would probably need to do is to do a little off-site research in public areas like some Brainerd Park and see where that trail comes down and where it would traditionally connect. Because my understanding is that even our site has been used in the past for people walking along the riparian area. And when the beavers came and kind of flooded things out, some of these trails were compromised. I don't know if they've been reconstituted or not.
I would definitely mention doing that beaver pond recommendation I mentioned before, especially since you have some major flooding in some areas compared to nothing. And if that's a large part of your mitigation, could prove to be useful information for us going forward for review, especially since, certain wildlife consequences provide either a benefit or the opposite to a wetland, depending on what it is. And then one of my other questions that I had was you mentioned in that figure you want to potentially create a wetland in that escarpment slope.
Yeah.
So I am a little bit confused with that method of creating a wetland on an escarpment. Could you provide some more details? Because I believe you would have to do a lot of extra cut and fill to make that wetland, thus adding to your direct impact.
Not necessarily. So we would not be into the wetland itself. So the light green area is a completely upland area, whereas the green area that we wouldn't be really touching the ground there, what we would be doing there is doing some restoration and removing invasives, which I know are there, and maybe doing some interplanting to sort of complement anything that would be up there. And if you can see there what I've done, I said equal or less than 8,000 square feet.
Would you be grading those slopes to make a wetland? Like, is it a stable, flat piece of land, or is it going to be?
So in East Windsor, at the big auto auction place. And this was an Army Corps of Engineers project. What they did, because they had some slopes, they did step wetlands. So they would create, let's see if I can,
You said step wetlands?
so they would create a wetland up here by doing a slight berm. And this is an upland area. And to make sure that hydrology is, and that will step down to another cell and then step down to the wetland. So now that this entire green area is 8,000 square feet, is a lot less. So I accommodated for the fact that you could create some, and the part that I'm also looking at is that we have a source of water, and that's the building roof. Because remember I said we need to bring a little bit of water from the building roof to make sure that these wetlands are hydrated. So it would be a sort of a dual thing, because the water keeps going downhill. So if we created a couple of step wetlands here, then the water would overflow down to the green area, which is eventually where we want the water to get there. So because you have the glacial lacustrine soils, that means you can have a perch water table if you create a little berm in the basin. It's very similar to what I did at 29 Moody Road. Remember that one? That was before this commission, which we created a perch water table on sand by using some silty clay loams. And then we created, and you'll see the final McCoy probably in a memo. But we don't have to do this here because those soils are already there. You have these silty that are creating this little perch water table. So that's something obviously that came to me today when I looked at George's report and said, can you maybe consider wetland E? And to me that said, well, there might be some other opportunities. And then I saw that, I'm like, if there are opportunities on site to mitigate wetland impacts, we should do it.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, but I'm just trying to understand the step wetland method that you were referring to. How do you ensure, and you might have mentioned this briefly, so apologies for my repetitiveness, but how would you ensure that by making a wetland and an escarpment slope by your step methodology, that it wouldn't erode away from, say, long periods of storms? Because you have other escarpments coming down. So I'm just wondering, are you proposing like a protection method for that wetland, like a retaining wall, or like how exactly that drainage portion is going to work out?
Obviously, the important part is so it's a little bit of a balance of how much water you want to put there. You don't want to put too much because then you have the potential to erode during a bigger storm, especially if you're using roof water. So usually what you do is on the upper portion right here, at the limit of disturbance, the way you get the water to hydrate this entire area is you put a stone trench. The water goes into that and then it overflows equally. It's almost like a level spreader to the next area. The first cell is you're basically going to super excavate a little bit of soil in here, and you're going to use some of that soil to create a shallow berm. It doesn't have to be more than a foot and a half. You obviously have to make sure that it's not, steep sloped, and it has to be obviously vegetated. And what you would do is you would allow the water to hydrate that first cell, and then go to the next cell, just overflow. And again, it's a matter of how much water do you allow. In the one in 29 Moody, we did it in such a way so that when this area flows, it spreads out evenly over a convex area down to the wetland, which is Freshwater Brook. So it's something similar. We have to do it in a way that it's not going to be erosive and it's going to be stable for a long period of time. So I am not nowhere close to giving you a final design for this.
No worries, I was just
So
curious.
I'm just spitballing off the top of my head of how I would do it.
Yes, so we would definitely need some methodology behind any wetland creation you plan to do, especially something like this, since I don't believe we've seen this one before in Enfield, especially on a escarpment slope like this. The other thing is, I know my report's not done. It's a lot of information to absorb, so bear with me while I work through it. But have you looked at the wetlands across the access. I have it as a wetland WF. It's a little tiny wetland, kind of goes down where that entertainment building is between the highway and the property. I know it's very small, just not a lot present there, but I'm sure there's room for opportunity should you investigate it.
Sure.
I'm trying to think about your ratio here of direct impact to mitigation. And I understand because of the project, there's not a lot of room on the property for such mitigation measures to be met. So just some ideas to try and maybe enhance or expand upon the tiny wetlands in the area, especially since you want to ensure that by eliminating wetland A, that groundwater that is being changed can still keep its storage capacity that the water company uses for the public drinking water supply. And granted, I'm not sure how much of that wetland contributes to the wellhead. I do know that Connecticut Water is doing an extensive review currently as I speak, and they wish to have more comments on the 19th. But just some food for thought for the drainage portion, because your stormwater design is going to be quite an important aspect to this property. Not to mention that Field 11 also cuts into a tiny area of the escarpments to the east. So you have a little bit of a cut there for Field 11.
Right.
And we can talk more about the details and what what you should submit for the continued hearing on the 19th, but just to give some clarification about what's being cut, what's being filled in.
Georgie, just on Field 11, the word cut is probably not accurate because that whole field is being held up by a retaining wall. So I think when you're using the word cut, it means that we're actually disturbing it. We're not actually cutting into the soil, we're filling over it.
I should clarify. When I mean cut in terms of grading, basically right now you have that escarpment that comes down almost to the middle of Field 11. By removing that escarpment area, that's kind of what I meant by cut. You're cutting out those slopes to make a flat surface, and you're holding it up by a retaining wall, which you're utilizing for Field 11. Not necessarily the wetland, more so the escarpment.
Okay. The soils will still be there. We're just building on them. We're not taking them out.
So you fill it.
But you're filling it in.
Over the
Okay.
place.
And my understanding is, because I asked the question of John, because I had a similar concern there, and especially because, we're right up against, a couple of these seepage wetlands, and the question was, how can we make sure that we don't disturb more than what we're saying? And he gave me the explanation, which I'm going to
Yeah.
ask you to give
Sure.
it again.
So the retaining walls that we are proposing are segmental type of retaining walls. They're basically blocks that are built up. If a retaining wall is being installed, there's two sides to it. There's an exposed face, and then there's the side that is of dirt. It's holding back. On the side that's holding back, there's usually a grid that goes out. So you excavate, you build the wall, you put a grid on it, and then you build up more soil, you build the wall, and you put more soil on it. And so the limit of disturbance on the retaining wall goes beyond the retaining wall. In this situation, what I just described, the retaining wall is on the fill side. So it's on the side where the exposed face are, and the wetlands are down here. So all the contractor is doing is from the face of the wall, he's using a machine, he's basically digging a trench and pulling it back. Then he's installing stone, and then he's putting in the first row of block. So the disturbance is anywhere from 6 inches to a foot beyond the face of the wall. It's not that big, long grid. That's on the other side. So that's why when we describe in this section, the disturbance is really at the face of the wall. It doesn't go far into the wetland.
So Field 11 will potentially be at a higher grade?
Yes.
So for doing that fill, where is that going to come from?
The way that we have the site graded is that we took an elevation at the existing building.
Yep.
And I believe it's elevation 124, just off the top of my head. And when you go towards Brainerd Road, the elevation increases in elevation. It's Brainerd Road is somewhere around 135, 138. And then as you go towards the back of the site here, you're down around 110, 112. So the thought is to take all the asphalt off, we'll grind that in place, and we'll stockpile it, and most of that will be used as base for the new parking lot that we're going to construct. The other fill that's excavated out will be stockpiled. It'll be evaluated by a geotechnical engineer, and it'll be mixed with material that makes it suitable for use as backfill, common fill. That might be stone, that might be some sand, and then it'll be placed in the areas where we are filling it. So it'll basically be moved from one portion of the site to a holding area to a processed and then put back in on that area there. So we're hoping to balance the site with that method. Cutting from one, filling on the other.
That's a lot.
It's a lot of fill.
Maybe I missed it in your application, but was that mentioned in your report, the fill types and the details about the fill for Field 11?
My report?
In any of your reports?
No.
I don't recall.
No,
If you
it's-
don't mind, if you could provide that information for the next time we meet.
Sure. There is on the demolition note,
Yep.
under the Planning and Zoning Art Commission,
Yeah.
there was some detailed information
Yep, I
asked
read them
about
all.
how that went in there. So we don't have the information now because that's something a geotechnical engineer is going to evaluate, and then he is going to specify what that mixing is. But the general procedure is described on the plans.
Okay. Yes, I do recall reading those.
And just to be clear, the material that's ground up from the asphalt, that will not be used as fill in these areas. That'll be stockpiled, used as base for the parking area, and the excess will be removed off-site.
Okay. I have more questions, but I'm just going to hold on to them for now just to form my thoughts. So please.
Okay. And we would want to see where the stockpile locations are is on the plans, obviously. Couple questions I have. So there's no need for an access road around the new basketball building?
We have provided a plan that's actually not part of this set to the fire department and EMS, and they are evaluating it. But right now, the parking garage and the new building has access on two sides. And on the third side, it's actually so close to the existing garage that access is not possible.
Okay. So, George, question for you. So you're talking about these wetland creation areas and pulling out the barberry and some of that stuff. What's going to prevent the Phragmites from going back in there?
Well, the areas where we're doing that is wooded,
Okay.
so Phragmites doesn't like
It's not gonna
shade.
flood, right, okay.
So that would be, and we're going to be careful not to introduce it. Plus, the other thing too is, sometimes you do see Phragmites kind of popping in here and
Yeah.
there, but it never does too much because it needs light.
And how are you going to stop the birds from depositing more barberry?
Yeah, well, here's the interesting part. Once you remove the barberry from an area, that means they're not coming in, and so they have to go somewhere else and then bring it back in.
Okay.
The problem is when there is barberry, they eat the berry and then
A burning bush or
goes from
whatever.
there.
Yeah, I think George already said it. I think I personally would want to see much more detailed plans on how that wetland restoration or creation areas are going to be done. And I didn't see any planting plans or anything like that. That's,
So, I think you include both what Georgie said, a little more detail on where the beaver dams are and which sections we would take out.
In addition, yes. So I would think of it as you're going to have to submit a few separate documents to me. One being that concept plan that you told me was a concept but are now going forward with. The other being the beaver pond locations, and then just a more descriptive methodology behind creating a wetland on a escarpment and what that entails and how maintenance will be done and if you're proposing a monitoring program or something like that.
Absolutely. I mean, all those things, you're familiar with what I've done, for instance, for 29.
That's why I mentioned monitoring program.
I'm also a little concerned, I think I'd like to, that there hasn't been a more detailed wildlife assessment. I think that would be appropriate.
So here's the problem with wildlife assessments. Sorry, apologize. So here's the problem with wildlife assessments. Usually what I try to do is I look at the characteristics, so the habitat components of a wetland, any season. And I can kind of tell based on my experience and the landscape position and a whole bunch of other factors of what the wildlife capability would be in a particular area. I can come up with a list now of what I expect to be there. But the commissions typically look at habitat characteristics and allow us to make evaluations based on that, because you don't directly regulate wildlife, you regulate the habitat that the wildlife utilize. There's a few notable exceptions. Vernal pools will be one. Cold water watercourses. You know, you could do assessments any time of the year. So there's a few others. So if you have critical habitats or pristine areas, yeah, some commissions want to know a little more. But this one, I can certainly come up and give you my qualified judgment as a wildlife biologist of what would utilize these areas. And I think I can tell you, because I'm going to have to go out and look at that escarpment area between now and then. If my backyard is telling me anything, wildlife are out.
Yeah, you mentioned in the charts, there's a little bit that you notice some tracks or whatever. So I think that would be appropriate. The other question I have is more about the soccer fields, the artificial turf. My question is about the rubber crumb. I assume they're going to have the rubber crumb?
You actually have someone who can answer that.
Yeah. So
Above my pay grade. so-
yeah. So this is one of my concerns is,
Wait, never mind.
first of all, I mean, both my kids played sports on the artificial turf at Fermi, and we had another name other than rubber crumb for them. One field had quite a bit. So my concern is what their impact on the environment could be, and what, first of all, keeps them in the field. I mean, because I know our house was loaded with it all the time, so if my house is loaded with it, I'm sure the environment around it gets in. And with 11 fields, that seems like a lot. So what is the impact of that, and how much does it use every, I know Fermi would replace it every once in a while, so what is that volume, what is that process, and how does that impact the environment around?
Sure. So my name is Alan Hubbard. I live in Westfield. I've been a professional,
Yeah, right into the microwave.
I've been a professional in the synthetic turf industry for about 20 years now. I'm not an engineer. I'm not a toxicologist. You know, don't want to represent myself as that.
Sure.
But the infill, rubber crumb, and infill migration is what we're referring to, is a topic of concern, not just for you, but for many communities and many countries. So there are many different measures that can be taken to mitigate what we call infill migration off the site. The synthetic turf fields themselves are surrounded by a concrete curb, all designed to hold that infill in place. Does some infill get in your kids, in their shoes, in their socks, things of that nature? It will. There are filters that can be put in place in the drainage fixtures around the fields to trap that infill. There are fixtures that can be put in the walkways leading to and from the fields that will capture that rubber crumb. So when the kids come off their field and they've got some, let's say if it's wet and they've got a little rubber crumb on their shoes, some grates can be installed to capture that. So there's many different things that can be done to.
Has that been planned in this?
I'm not sure if it has or not. I can't honestly answer that.
Just to note on that, the
Identify yourself.
Yeah, we know who you, just into the
John
microphone.
Furman from
Yeah.
VHB.
Yeah.
The drainage plan for the fields has these fingers underneath every field. And there's a collector pipe. The collector pipes basically outlet what's in this view right here. So they all enter that one area. There's two main trunks that connect to that. Each trunk has what's called an MDC trap. It's a special fixture. So as water comes into that, it's trapped inside of it, and the outlet is below the surface, and it comes out at an angle. So its main intent is to keep anything that's floatable in that structure. The outlet is below the surface. So the rubber products, they're so small they float. So as they come in, they stay on the surface. Water comes off underneath, it's clear. So none of that will be exiting the fields.
So it stays in the field? Is that what you're saying?
The majority of it stays in the field. For whatever is trapped on shoes and goes into the walkways by the concession stands, if that happens to get washed into the drainage system because there's drains there, there's two things we can do. The first is we can actually add a grid on those drains to trap it there. If that grid isn't there and it gets into the drainage system, it's trapped on these two fixtures, and then it just becomes a maintenance thing. You suck them out, machine goes out there, cleans them out, disposes of them, and then it continually works.
So
there is protection from keeping that product from going out into the wetlands.
So has there been a maintenance plan developed based on this?
Not yet,
Assuming
no.
not? Okay. All right, yeah, so that's a concern. Do you know anything about how, because my understanding is they're from ground-up tires? Is that what it's made from?
That's correct.
And so is there any toxicity to the environment that we should be concerned with this?
Well, again, I'm not a toxicologist,
Yeah.
and I don't want to represent myself.
Just put the mic
I'm
to your.
sorry.
Yeah.
I'm not a toxicologist, so
Yeah.
I don't want to represent myself as one. I've been through probably 100 different hearings like this on different projects all over New England. So I understand your process, I understand
yeah.
your concerns, and I have a lot of respect for it.
Yeah.
The reason why I'm here is that over the years, I've been able to compile test data from, a credible, independent, third-party sources, such as the EPA, Connecticut Department of Health, Mass Department of Health, recent studies, older studies, that all point to the product being non-toxic and safe. Now, what does that mean? I like to think in terms of common sense, because again, I'm not a toxicologist or an organic chemist, but been in many conversations with people that have that accreditation. And basically, these fields are as safe as you getting in your car and driving here tonight. You're not exposed to any more toxins than you are when you're in your car, driving down the highway, when you're in your backyard on your riding lawnmower. Doesn't mean that there's no toxins there.
Yeah.
But they're not there in a concentration that's going to hurt you.
Okay.
That's my common
Yeah.
sense.
We'll get you some information on that.
Yeah, I was just going to say.
Yeah.
I was going to
Everybody's going to
say,
get a chance. Yeah.
I brought a USB drive with me
Yeah.
tonight that contains these reports with the intention of leaving it behind.
Excellent,
So I'm happy to share it and leave it behind so that you can all see it.
excellent.
Good.
That's the questions I have right now. You want to start to the left?
Questions, yes.
Anything down there? No? Okay.
Just while I'm here, I wanted to know how high and wide the retaining wall would be and what would be the difference in elevation from the top to the bottom to the escarpments. Mr. Furman.
Okay, John Furman.
John Furman, yes.
They are varying heights, but the highest retaining wall is closest to Brainerd Road, out of the jurisdictional area. I'm reading off of, if you have our site plans available to you, I'm right now, I'm looking at sheet C501. And in the southeast corner, there is a spot grade for the retaining wall. The top of wall is 138. The bottom of wall is 124. So that wall is about 14 feet high. If you go to the other end of that wall, so it is the south, what, did I say southwest before? Southeast.
Yeah.
So now we go to the southwest. On the other corner, the wall is 2 feet tall. So it varies. It goes, as Brainerd Road kind of comes up in elevation, the wall is higher to the west, higher to the east than it is to the west. So if we go, and then at some point, as you travel from Brainerd Road and go to the back of the site, the wall swaps. So if you're near Brainerd Road, the exposed face is against the soccer fields. You turn the corner, and now you're going down that property line away from Brainerd Road. The wall comes down in elevation, and then it flips. So now the exposed face of the wall is facing the property line, and there's a fence along the top of the fields, so it just basically flips elevation. So at the back corner, which is right by this outlet here, the wall, top of wall is 123, and the bottom of wall is 112. So that wall in that corner is 11 feet tall. If you go to the other corner, which is closest to the parking garage, let's see here, top of wall is 135, and the bottom of wall is 125, so the wall is 10 feet. So in general, that back wall is 10 to 11 feet tall. And then as you turn the corner and come back to the site, it just basically reverses how it got there.
It's all fenced, so no one could ever fall over.
Oh, yes. We have sheet 8, I believe, gives a typical, yes, sheet 8 is our field enlargement plan. And it basically, the intent of this plan is to kind of show the field layout and then the varying levels of fence around it. So there's sections of fence that are 12 feet tall, I believe. I'm sorry, 16 feet tall, and there's levels of 4, there's levels of 6, so it varies. But the entire area is fenced off.
On this plan that I'm looking at,
Yes.
what's that small area to the east? Is that drainage or?
The small area to the east. This thing right here?
The
Yes.
dark, yeah.
Right here. So that is the outlet from the drainage system. And what you're seeing right there is the black line is the drainage pipe. And then that kind of triangular shape with a pattern in it, that is a riprap splash box. So as the water comes out of that, it basically entertains itself with the rocks that are there. It loses all its energy, and then it basically fills up and spills over and goes down the slope.
Is there that much energy in the water coming out from underneath there?
All water has energy. A drop of water has energy. Long enough, if it drops, it's going to etch through something. So we just do that as a precaution. These pipes are dead flat, and energy is created by volume and velocity. So by having the pipes dead flat, we're taking away most of the ability for it to generate energy. But we put that there as a precaution. It would be irresponsible of us to show a pipe outletting to a ground surface without some kind of protection there.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Just a couple things. In the section 4 mitigation in the book,
George's book.
in George's book, during the presentation, I thought he said the beavers were gone. But in here, it says partial removal of the 2 beaver dams.
Beaver dams.
Right, but are the beavers going to stay?
No, the beavers are gone.
Are you going to knock down the dams or leave the dams up?
We're going to take, instead of, so the beaver dams are long.
Yep.
Obviously go right across that wetland. So taking the entire beaver dam down, it's more of a disturbance. So the idea is to go in and take a section out
Okay.
at the proper place where, roughly where the lower spot is, where the brook used to go.
Yep,
And that will basically drain the beaver pond.
great.
So,
The,
yeah, and do that at two locations.
okay. The other thing is, there's a 3-year monitoring that's proposed. Are you going to be doing the monitoring?
Oh, someone like myself.
Okay, okay. And then I like that no herbicides are going to be utilized in removing the invasives, so
Well,
that's
the
great.
water company wouldn't let us anyhow. so-
Good. My question is for the 2 mitigation strategies. You said an estimated 12 to 14 acres of forested land will be designated as open space. Could it be less than 12 acres? Or is it going to be between 12 and 14 acres?
So what we need to do, and this is the number that I was given to me, but obviously I don't have a map
No.
to show. So we probably need to give you an exact number and show you in a figure once we're complete. Okay, this is the area that we're talking about, and it might include this area here because obviously, whoops, ay. So if we ended up doing something here, that will be part of the area that's going to be in a conservation easement.
Okay, and a couple other things. I saw, it was discussed about the walking trails might be on, you can't go on other people's properties, but it did say that you're going to connect to existing trails.
Correct. That was my understanding, that there were existing trails
Okay.
that came off the public land
Okay.
that connected here. So I need to do a little more research,
Yep.
as Georgie asked me a little earlier to do.
Yeah,
Can you add the location of that proposed conservation easement as well?
thank you. And lastly, it talks about off-site mitigation via an in lieu of fee of mitigation fee. Who and how is mitigation fee set, and how can we earmark it so it doesn't go in the general fund and wander away somewhere?
We'll come up with something.
Okay. Okay, that's my concern, because it's a great plan, but I know town bureaucracy, so we want to make sure to address it.
If I could, John Furman, I think that is outdated information. We were originally planning on doing a fee in lieu of.
Yep.
But we've actually identified some areas within town that might actually be more suitable for mitigation.
Okay.
Versus actually just kind of cutting a check and then having to deal with that issue you just talked about.
Yep.
So we need to put that down, finalize that, and
Okay.
that'll be part of the information we give you. So I don't think
Super.
that the fee in lieu of is on the table anymore.
Thank you,
Okay.
that's a good idea.
We'd like to talk to
Staff,
staff and other people in town and see like what's on your list of things that you might think are appropriate.
okay.
We're going to
Well,
have
thank
to
you.
do some research into that. A lot of our projects are already funded, but let's do some research on that end, and I hope to have some more clarification on how that would work for the next meeting.
Okay, thank you, Georgie. Okay, that's for me.
Anything down the end?
Yeah, so I just have a few little questions. So I want to start off by saying, is there a way to just adjust the plan to not build Field 11? Because Field 11 seems to be the main concern here for the entire wetlands issues that are coming up in the project here. I'm not sure how familiar you guys are with the town in Enfield, but I've lived here all my life. We have JFK, there's a park, I forget the name of it, the beginning of Taylor Road. There's Wallop School Park, and a bunch of other ones that we have that have actually been renovated that are underused. And I just wanted to ask why you think that this development would be more used, especially by out-of-state or out-of-town people. And how do we know that all 11 of these fields are going to be consistently utilized, even, say, 3 months, 6 months, 6 years after the project's completed?
So,
Here you go.
Hi. So,
Identify yourself.
Andy Borgia, Fast Track Realty. So, we've done a feasibility study, to see if this will work in this area and whatever, and the demographics. At the end of the day, our feasibility study told us that we should have more room for expansion to build more fields because we're going to need them in 3 to 4 years. So, we're trying to, this is a $90 million project. So every field is a revenue stream for us. And we taking that out makes it very difficult to meet, our debt service. So we really need every field that we can. That's why originally we were talking about Brainerd Park, where we would do something in coordination with the town, but unfortunately that fell through. So, but it's imperative that we have as many fields as possible. And there's not much of an impact there, So.
Okay. I just have another thing that there's a Fairfield Inn right next door. And I know you said that you mentioned a hotel and other amenities that would possibly, bring in, other people. I just wanted to know, if that would be unfair to the business of the hotel that's delivered.
We do just need to keep it wetlands. It's got to be wetlands related.
All right. No, I got you. Okay. I had another thing about just the construction vehicles, and if you guys have taken into a lot of those vehicles use diesel fuel, gas, oil, and I just want to make sure that all the debris and stuff isn't going to be getting into the waterways that are right there, because it could kill off wildlife, if there are any sort of things there.
The current construction practices and all the new vehicles, they all have to adhere to new air quality standards. The day of the old billowing bulldozer with the black smoke coming out, those days are all over. You can stand next to one of these diesel engines now and not even hear it running. They're in completely quiet. The order of conditions usually includes provisions that there won't be any fueling of vehicles within any resource areas. Any concrete that's used on the project, there's usually a concrete area for trucks to wash themselves out. They can't just kind of wing it on the side like they used to do. The current construction practices have improved over the years, and regulations have forced that. So there won't be any there won't be any issues with respect to that. In addition, a stormwater pollution prevention plan and a general permit will be required for this. And the contractor that puts that stormwater pollution prevention plan together, it's very detailed. It's a living document. He has to sign it, and he has to adhere to everything he puts in here. So there's accountability for that document. So you can rest assured with your approval, your order of conditions in that document, the oversight that's going to happen, there won't be any damage. If there is, it would be a complete accident. It would be unfortunate, but it would be immediately addressed. It would be a recurring thing.
I have a question for Mr. Bridges' question. If you're not going to fuel on site, where would the fueling take place?
I didn't say on site. I said on a resource area.
Well, the entire property is on an aquifer.
Yes, but that is not an area that you guys regulate. Isn't that for planning and zoning?
True, but it still correlates to groundwater recharge for the wetlands.
It would. My guess would be is that it would be in the new parking lot area that we're going to designate a stockpile, and that parking lot area has a. When it's used as a stockpile, it would have a paved surface on it to prevent anything from infiltrating in, and a fueling corral could be established on that.
I just have one more point. So I know I hate using people's words against them, but I know you guys were talking about a lot about the beavers, I guess, that are there, and the dams that are obstructing any waterways. I want a little bit more clarification on how exactly building a $90 million project is going to be more environmentally friendly than just sending in an environmental cleanup team to unclog the beaver dams that are there. You said too that vegetative diversity plummets by the beavers. Another thing is that we're building this project and all of that's going to be gone anyway. And you also talked about some trees or some non-invasive species that you called invasive. I want a clarification on that too, because if something's not labeled non-invasive right now, then how is it invasive in X amount of time?
On the last one, there's a list that's put forth by the Connecticut Department of Energy, Environmental Protection and some of the groups that work with them, specifically the Connecticut Invasive Plant Working Group, CPWIG, which puts together a list that tells you which the invasive species are. And there's big efforts all around, usually by volunteers and volunteer organizations, which go in and remove invasives. So it's a very well-known practice that by removing invasives, you allow regeneration of plants that are beneficial to wildlife. The other thing that is in the report, I don't know if you saw it, let me read it. And again, we can be a little more specific, because I know if we're not, George is going to tell us we're being too specific. But under the mitigation program, one of the things that we said here is, this is on page 21, in addition to invasive plant removal, interplanting, which means finding spaces where you could put plants, with native shrub species shall take place, especially in those areas where the dense patches of invasive species are removed. You have a big batch of invasive species, you remove it, you basically have an open area. A minimum, leaving a sparse woody in the soil, a minimum of 275 shrubs will be, and this is a minimum, will be planted consisting of the following species: spice bush, sweet pepper bush, gray dogwood, American hazelnut, and naryberry. And there could be others, but that's a typical practice when you go in and you do habitat restoration in some of these areas, in wetlands and the surrounding areas. So obviously these seepage areas, the invasives are not just within, the wetlands, they expand outside. So you can do restoration within the wetland, but also restoration in the uplands around it, which will benefit the function of the wetland. Now, you got a point in talking about the beavers, because it's a balancing act. I don't want to throw beavers under the bus or over the dam, or however we say it. Beavers, in many areas, they do benefits because they provide habitats and diversify. Now, sometimes they overdo it, and especially if we have a thriving watercourse. So it's a balancing act. So the idea is, yep, they killed all the trees. We don't expect they're going to bring trees back immediately, but if we can diversify the environment, and the way you diversify it is by creating various hydrologic regimes. Right now, under the beaver dams, you have one hydrologic regime, either permanent water or semi-permanent water. You get rid of a section of the dam and drain it out. Now you have saturated areas, you have seasonally flooded areas, you have temporary flooded areas, and a bunch of other hydrologies. And every different hydrology brings different abundance of different species that are there. So again, we want to be careful, because again, it's a balancing act. We don't want to go nuts, but I think this particular watercourse and wetland system would benefit by removing sections of the beaver dams.
I just wanted to reference Virginia's point too, because she did mention that even though the beavers aren't there right now, I mean, during the spring and summertime, they're going to start coming out again. And our not unfortunate, but our duty as members of the committee is to make sure that wildlife and the habitats and the vegetation is all protected. And we've had the records of the developments in 1982, 2004, 2005, 2013, and now we have this new project. And who's to say that in 20 years, the entire area that is designated wetlands right now isn't completely gone? And we'd have no use of the committee if we're
Excuse me real
expanding.
quick. I can help answer that question, Mr. Bridge. Wildlife gets a little bit tricky when you get into the wetlands regs. In the statutes, wetlands cannot specifically deny an application on the impact of wildlife alone. That was an issue we faced a couple months ago with a different project. However, if such wildlife is proved to have a substantial effect on an existing wetland in a watercourse, then the commission can use it as determination. Which brings me to my question to Mr. Logan, if there was a interrelationship of critters from wetland A to wetland B.
Yeah, I mean, avians would be one. Obviously, they can fly through. Some of the kind of animals, the larger species that will travel from one wetland to the other. Obviously, deer, we have them. common species, raccoon, foxes,
So when you were
coyotes.
in the field doing Wetland A, you had mentioned that there wasn't much of a presence of wildlife
the
because you were
time.
more looking at the vegetative species
Right.
more so than the wildlife.
Right.
So you're not really sure what wildlife is actually out there.
Well,
currently?
Again, I base that on my experience and the evaluation of the actual habitat. And I do a lot of evaluations of just looking wildlife habitat and telling you what I expect there. And sometimes I have to do extra studies. For instance, we talked about vernal pools, which don't exist on this site. So the idea is that I can tell you what the interrelationship would be between wetland A and wetland B. Obviously, you have part of wetland B that's right next door. So these large passage species, as we call them, the ones that traverse the habitat, like, some of the foxes, the coyotes, the deer, raccoons, et cetera, will utilize both areas. They will go back and forth. Yeah. So there's no denying that. But these are common species.
I just find it a little bit difficult for our agency to make that determination, especially if you reference Connecticut General Statutes 22A-36 subsection D, where it specifically mentions that only the Inland Wetlands Commission may make factual determination of whether physical characteristics of the wetlands are impacted, and commission cannot make such determination without information about wildlife. So I just think
And is that?
it is 22A-36 subsection D. If you, with all the experience and knowledge that you mentioned, if you could find a way to find that data of the wildlife species that you believe are out there, that would be great to have,
I already wrote that
especially
down.
in determining the interrelationship between those wetlands as it correlates back to them making a decision.
Certainly.
I'm all set with my questions.
So just to clarify, the beavers are not there now because they were removed by the town.
Right.
They didn't migrate. They were forced off the property by the town.
They were relocated.
Yes, in a long process that I believe involved the courts and other property owners and all kinds of things that went on for almost a decade, I think.
Yep.
So, yeah. Yeah, no, that's why I stated it. Right. Thank you. Thanks, George.
Mr. Logan, you said that you were thinking of enhancing wetlands E. What did you have in mind?
I didn't have anything in mind. The reason that I mentioned wetland E was because Georgie said, basically look for opportunities at the site. How about wetland E? I'm like, oh, okay, so let's look for opportunities. And I ignored the wetland E, sorry, because I've seen it, and I don't think there's much opportunity there, except maybe removal of invasives. But then I looked at that green areas that you see in the plan as having high potential because that's an open mowed lawn. So I'm like, oh, we could do something there for sure.
Okay. And I think you also said that wetland A was going to be filled in. Is that correct?
Correct. All
Okay.
2.45 acres of it.
And so are you going to be doing something somewhere else on the site? Because I know you're removing, or that some parking lots are going to be removed, so it's not going to be, a parking lot. However, they're going to have artificial turf on it, so they're really not wetlands.
Correct. So what we mentioned is that in the report and the discussions that we've had today, we've identified various mitigative measures as far as kind of replacing function, but there's a limited amount that we can do on site because the areas that remain actually have potential just ecological integrity themselves. You don't disturb them. And so that's where the discussion came, that we're going to identify with the help of staff areas around town related to wetlands and watercourses, which can be enhanced, restored to some extent to offset what's happening
Okay.
on this site.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
No questions.
All right, we will We will open this up to the public now. I have 3 people on the list. We'll do these people. I know some people came in late. If you'd like to speak, you can after these. I don't think we necessarily need to put an extended limit on it, but if we could keep the first round to under 5 minutes for each individual, that I think would be appropriate. So the first person I have is Carol West. Disappeared? Did she go? Okay. Karen LaPlante?
Good evening. Karen LaPlante, 166 North Maple Street. And as many of you know, I am a member of the Conservation Commission, but these comments from me these comments tonight from me are as a concerned citizen. I'm concerned this project is above and right next door to a major water supply. And I have the following questions for the applicant. Could you please provide contract specifications for the artificial turf? Are you requiring PFAS-free? Please supply the manufacturer, the brand, the make and model of the artificial turf material if a specific brand is already decided. What is the lifespan of the proposed turf? Please provide the manufacturer's brand and make and model of the sand/crumb infill for the fields. Testing artificial turf should be mandatory on this project, as it is going to be about 17 acres of coverage over this aquifer. Testing performed should include synthetic precipitation leaching procedures. That test should be done first. Then a test for individual PFAS. This will show what will leach off the field, and the detection limits must be low enough to detect PFAS in the lower parts per trillion, which is basically a drop of PFAS in like 20 Olympic-sized swimming pools. So that's how dangerous and widespread this PFAS problem is. Most artificial turf material has PFAS, PFOAs, and other chemicals that are used or make their way into the manufactured product, including various VOCs, SOCs, lead, and others. Can the applicant provide a certified laboratory report showing test results for the leaching of these chemicals are equal to the safe drinking water standards for these chemicals, including the latest recommended EPA standard in parts per trillion for the PFAS? Ground-up tires have been proven to contain many toxins. Salmon are dying in the Northwest due to runoff from street tires from the street. In North Carolina, nurseries are not using rubber mulch because it is killing their plants. Can the applicant supply certified lab results with similar drinking water standards as above for the crumb fill, the sand crumb infill that is proposed? Fields often use antimicrobials and herbicides on their fields once installed. What are the chemicals going to be? And please provide a specific plan for their application and any possible impacts they will have on the wetlands, watercourses, and upland review areas of this project. Please clarify for the if the drainage from the turf fields is going to be going into the sanitary sewer, as shown on the drawing on page C 9.03. Oil and gas separator. Please clarify the statement on page 5 of the stormwater report narrative where it states, quote, "Within the stone will be flat subdrains that will collect the field water and convey it to a perforated perimeter drain that will outlet the water to the wetlands on site towards the north. Some areas between and around the fields that are concrete will have trench drains to collect the water and pipe it to the perimeter collection pipe," end quote. Explain further what the a perforated perimeter drain will be, and will the chemicals from the fields be traveling down into the public drinking water supply, also known as the Aquifer Protection Area, that goes all the way up to the 91 corridor. Page 12 of the Wetlands Assessment Summary of Findings states, quote, "The proposed project has been designed to infiltrate stormwater back into the ground to the extent possible," end quote. Will the chemicals and microplastics from these fields be entering the public water supply, also known as the Aquifer Protection Area? Can you provide studies that the additional chemicals and microplastics entering our waterways from the plastic turf will not impact local habitat or habitats many miles from this project, as these foreign particles infiltrate and pollute everything downstream and along the Connecticut River and Long Island Sound? Baseline readings of the soil, wetlands, and groundwater should be required before installing the turf. Otherwise, we will not know when any future contamination may have occurred and who to blame. Feasible and prudent alternatives seems to be only mentioned only once in the documents. Page 17 of the Wetlands Assessment Summary of Findings mentions the following. Quote, "Feasible and prudent alternatives to the development were considered during the early planning phases for this project, especially regarding the soccer fields and the impacts to Wetland A. It was determined that between 5 and 6 soccer fields would have to be removed from the athletic complex in order to not impact Wetland A. This would critically undermine the purpose and scope of the entire project and render it economically unfeasible and therefore not prudent for the developer," I'm going to add. To compensate for this loss of Wetland A offsite and onsite mitigation strategies were sought and are proposed. These are discussed in the mitigation section of the report, end quote. Offsite strategies are not discussed in the mitigation section of the report. Please explain further in writing. I have not seen a discussion on the most feasible alternative to this project is to propose natural turf fields. The city of Springfield has natural turf fields at Forest Park. And with their population, they probably will see the same activity as these fields will see. Please clarify why this is not a feasible and prudent alternative to these 17 acres of plastic being put on in our town over a major water supply. Thank you. And if you're concerned, this pamphlet is written by oncologists at Yale University. A former Department of Public Health official is on this board. They are a nonprofit environmental group. They do lots of research on stuff, and I'm hoping to have one of their people speak at the next meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. All right, next is Bill Cote. Yeah, I'll get back to you. You weren't here when we first called. Okay. No worries. I'll get to you after.
So my name is Bill Cote. I'm a lifelong resident of Enfield on 343 Elm Street, except for 5 years between 90 and 95 where I lived in Rochester. So in any case, I am the chairman of the Conservation Commission, and you've just heard from Karen. Karen feels very deeply about synthetic fields. This was discussed at our last meeting back in February, and it was agreed to by the Conservation Commission to send a letter to Inland Wetlands as well as Planning and Zoning, and we will be sending a letter to the Town Council, the Town Manager, and to Lori as the Town Planner. And what I want to do is read this letter this evening just so you're aware of it today, all right? So as far as the project goes, we have no concerns about the project. It's not within our realm as the Conservation Commission. But as the Conservation Commission, we are tasked with 5 main goals: open space preservation, farmland preservation, aquifer protection, archaeological protection, and special projects, right? This falls into the aquifer protection section of our mandate. So the proposed infield sports complex falls within the aquifer protection is therefore, well, I just said that, all right? Since the proposed infield sports complex project is planned to contain synthetic turf athletic fields, the ECC did some research to investigate if there are any inherent risk to the aquifer. The information we found was not entirely definitive. However, there was enough evidence to be of concern. All right? So, you know, to the gentleman earlier, the synthetic fields just really haven't been there enough or long enough to get definitive answers whether they are harmful to water or harmful to the individuals playing on those fields. Right? But there's enough of a concern that we as a town should be aware of that. Right? So since the information we found entirely, ECC felt the need to alert the other commissions of possible issues that could affect the aquifer and wastewater drainage due to chemicals leaching from the synthetic fields, but also about the potential hazard to the athletes using the field. Those are health hazards, right? In general, when I Googled synthetic athletic fields, the first response I received said playing on synthetic turf has raised concerns due to several factors. Let's delve into the potential hazards associated with artificial turf. This came from Google, right? It just popped up. All right. Chemicals in artificial turf. Artificial turf consist of layers including carpet backing, plastic grass blades, carpet fibers, and infield material for cushioning, right? Per and polyfluoroalkyl substances, PFAS, have been detected in artificial grass blades and carpet backing, right? Everybody's heard about PFAS, I assume, right? Infield materials often made from waste tires contain toxic chemicals such as polyaromatic hydrocarbons, which are PHAS or PAHS, right? Lead, cadmium, and other harmful substances. Alternative infill materials also pose concerns and none are entirely free of issues, right? Microplastic pollution. Artificial turf can release tiny microplastics into the environment. These microplastics may contribute to pollution and have potential health implications. Again, it's not conclusive, but there's enough evidence to be concerned with what's going on with plastics, right? Excessive heat, right? Synthetic turf tends to absorb and retain heat, especially during hot weather. Prolonged exposure to high temperatures can be uncomfortable for the players themselves, right? Injury rates. Some studies suggest that artificial turf fields have higher injury rates compared to natural grass, skin abrasion more frequently on artificial turf, disposal challenges, and this is, personally, I'm really concerned about what we're doing other places. So artificial turf typically lasts about a decade. Disposing of tens of thousands of pounds of turf material per field poses environmental challenges. And one of the things I did find out in my own research that these carpets, we'll call them, or these fields, a lot of them go to a farm in Pennsylvania, and they're not monitored once they're gone to the farm. So they're sitting there. Not all of them, but a lot of them do go there, and they're just sitting there. And what is the potential health hazard for that area as well, right? So children in particular may be more vulnerable to these hazards. Considering these factors, communities are exploring alternatives, including sustainably managed natural grass fields. Karen mentioned that Springfield, Massachusetts put in organic natural soccer field at Forest Park, right? While synthetic turf provides convenience, it is essential to weigh the risk and benefits deciding on playing surfaces. That's what I got from Google, right? So in addition, the following statement was copied from the EAH website, the Environmental Human Health Incorporated, which is one of the organizations that Karen mentioned. their website states, it says, "There is enough information now concerning the potential health effects from chemicals emanating from rubber tire crumbs to place a moratorium on installing any new fields or playgrounds that use ground-up rubber tires until additional research is undertaken." You know, it's to me, it's concerning, right? The ECC recommends additional research and investigation prior to approving any synthetic field, athletic fields, especially a project such as the Enfield Sports Complex that expects to have multiple fields installed over the aquifer and adjacent to the Connecticut Water Company pumping stations. The ECC has been in contact with 2 experts who are willing to speak and answer questions regarding the synthetic athletic field and playgrounds. One of them Karen mentioned. The other person is Kyle Bennett. She's Director of Science Policy for Public Employees for Environmental Responsibility. All right. She is located in northeastern Massachusetts. She would come here and she would sit in front of this group if you so desire. Right? There's 3 items of note. Page 6, 7, and 8 of this memo list chemicals found in a study of synthetic fields conducted by Yale University. I'm not going to read all of those because I can't pronounce most of them, but there were 10 carcinogens found in the crumb on the synthetic fields. There were, I think it was 21 irritants that were found. Of the chemicals found, 5 of them are toxic to aquatic life, right? And we're talking about a wetlands area here, right? And several of them, I think there are like 5 or 6 in the crumb itself, not the carpet, not the grass itself, but in the crumbs, there's at least 5 chemicals that are PFAS. Right? So the second one is manufacturers of synthetic fields state that the fields are permeable, but the EPA has determined that synthetic fields are impermeable. So if there's any drainage system going in place, it should be designed as a impermeable surface. It should not be designed as a permeable surface. And the water coming off those fields should not go into the environment, should not go into the wetlands. And it's even, you know, when you consider it, I think Karen mentioned it as well, it goes into our sewage system, it becomes concentrated in the sludge that's created by the treatment plant. So it gets even worse at that point, right? So again, Karen mentioned the alternative to synthetic fields is natural grass. It was done in Springfield. There's when you guys get this letter, there's a link to a YouTube video showing what they did. It doesn't tell you a whole lot, just the fact that they did it and that it worked very well for them. Okay. That's it. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, we'll go back to Carol.
Hello.
Hi, just state your name and address for the record, please.
Carol West, 90 Brainerd Road.
Thank you.
I live directly across the street. As far as wildlife goes, I walk my dog in the park, and there's a lot of deer poop. A lot of deer poop. So they are there, along with other animals. As far as the beavers, you're getting rid of a wetland that was created naturally to create an artificial wetland. Bring the beavers back, you know? As far as those little rubber, what do you call them?
The crumbs.
The crumbs. I live, like I said, directly across the street. If they can float on water, the wind comes straight in front of my house. There's like an alley, it's like a wind alley between the 2 houses there. what's to stop those crumbs going in my yard, contaminating, my yard? I have a dog. What's going to stop that from coming into my yard? I don't know. I don't approve of it at all. I don't want to look at it. It's going to bring down the cost of my house. My property.
Thank you. All right, anyone else that did not sign up, come on up. Go ahead, just state your name and address for the record, please.
Good evening, Gretchen Pfeiffer Hall, 4 Summers Road, Enfield. My great concern is basically those retaining walls that are going to be built on escarpment soils. The presentation really sort of glossed over that, and they are highly erodible. They're not very stable. I don't really understand how you're going to build these retaining walls on top of escarpment soils. Town of Enfield has a lot of history, a lot of experience with escarpment terraced soils that have been compromised. We've spent millions of dollars repairing them along the Scantic River corridor, off of Cloud Street, off of, I think it's Kimberly Drive, Michael Drive, the end of, over by Holy Family Church, the end of Kelly Drive, I think. JFK, and the JFK field was a lot of runoff from that, and there was a drainage system that was completely compromised, and they had to rebuild it, and it outlets at the bottom of the escarpments. So I don't really understand how you build these retaining walls. It appears in sort of on top of the slope. So if they're not stable, what is the base of these retaining walls? So it just seems like not a good plan. And you have wetlands at the base of these, and so if this fails, or when it fails, it's all going to go downhill. And a lot of these failures were basically private property, but the town of Enfield picked up the tab. And I can see that happening here, and I can see it happening because all that soil is going to go down Waterworks Brook, and it's going to destroy wetlands, the brook, and we're going to be responsible for it in the long run. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, anyone else who would like to speak from the public? Anyone else? One last time, go ahead.
Karen LaPlante, 166 North Maple Street. As far as economically feasible, I had talked to a natural turf field person who builds natural turf soccer fields. He used to work with FIFA in Europe, And it's also my understanding that they won't even allow the tournaments in the United States to go on artificial turf, so they're transforming them over to natural turf fields. So why is Europe changing their mind on these artificial turfs? I think the wave is coming, and I don't think we need to let this happen at this point with artificial turfs. Natural turf field, he estimated at $400,000 per field, and he said because he's built both, he knows the costs on these, and there are instances when maybe it should be used. But on the artificial turf field, the cost is $1.5 million per field. So there's a big difference in price there, and it may come down to the issue of having a maintenance person mowing the fields and having a pesticide, licensed pesticide inspector and fertilize person who has a supervisory license to make sure he doesn't put down things that don't need to be put down. I did go to the fields up at Forest Park, and they looked great. They looked absolutely nice and flat, not a weed to be seen. Of course, they're not playing on them right now, but they looked pretty good, and that video is about 7 years old. So I said, well, I don't even want to mention it unless I go and see the fields, because they could be all looking like heck right now, but they looked real good. So, and they're multi-purpose fields. They're not just for soccer. They have baseball fields there and everything. So anyway, I'm not necessarily against the project. If it's done right, it could be one of the best places in New England to go. But I think we need to do this right. We need to do it once. And, you know, these turf fields, after 8 or 10 years, where are you going to dispose of them? There is no place to dispose of these properly and be recycled. There are some places you can Google, and they're reusing these artificial turf fields. Supposedly Exxon has got something in Texas where they will burn the plastic, but it does not destroy all of the PFAS, so it ends up in the air. So it's just, I think, a nightmare that's going to be huge in the extremely near future, especially when EPA sets the limits on PFAS. PFAS is everywhere, and it's a big problem. Thanks.
Thank you. All right. Anyone else from the public? All right. If the applicants want to come and respond to any of the comments or questions? What's that?
For the record, Carl Landolina, we're going to make this very brief. We're going to be coming back, obviously. We've got to make some revisions to our plans. We've got copious notes. That's what I'm hired to do, is just write stuff down. But before we leave, I just want to make a couple of comments that I think are necessary to leave you with. And the first off, one of the comments would be that apparently this letter you're going to get is going to invite you to watch a YouTube video. I don't represent you. I have represented this town in the past, and I've represented towns for a long time. I'd caution you about doing that, or at least get advice from staff or the town attorney before you do your own research without bringing that information back with you. So if you're going to watch a YouTube video, it should be made part of the record. So I caution especially some of the newer members. Secondly, we will respond to all those issues that were brought up tonight that are relevant and within your jurisdiction. That's our charge here, and that's your charge. I know most of you know that. There were things that are mentioned, especially by the public, that are outside of your jurisdiction. And I know you listen to almost everything that people will say. I mean, it's not appropriate to cut people off, I don't think, entirely. So I would just mention that. So with that, I think we'll see you again on 2 weeks from tonight. We'll try to get all revisions, all new reports, all new studies into staff in an appropriate time frame, so they have time to look at it. This is a big project. There are a lot of, and the fact that it's on an aquifer and next door to Connecticut Water Company property makes this a little more complicated. I will tell you that I've seen Connecticut Water Company come, and I wouldn't be surprised if they weren't here on the 19th, or at least if they think, the only reason they won't be here is because they don't think there's a problem, in which case we'll hope to get a letter from them. But if they show up, they'll have some concerns. That's why the statute requires us to give them notice. So we'll see you on the 19th, and hopefully answer the questions that you do have and that the public has, and continue on with our presentation.
Thank you. I think we should set up a site visit. Do we need to vote on that?
So it was mentioned from the last meeting too, and it was received that the chairwoman would like to do a site walk as well. This is a recommended motion that I drafted on my motion recommendation sheet. This date should be discussed with the applicant while they're present. I can make a recommended date if it works for the applicant's team. I have March 8th, which is a Friday, in the afternoon, around 2-ish to start. And if you want to go from there, you have next week as well.
So you're planning on doing this in mass as a group?
So basically, I'm sorry, it would be a public site walk where the applicant would meet on site with the Wetlands Agency. And the site walk exists where the agency and the applicant go.
I'm familiar with what you're proposing, but I'm telling, one of the things that I'd like to inform you, obviously it'll be a meeting, you'll have to put an agenda up.
That's what we do.
Yep. But we have some control over the site. We're not the owners. Mass Mutual is, so we'll have to discuss it with them first. Obviously, you have the right, but whether the public or not is going to be able to have access to this site during this site walk will have to be discussed with staff and with the owner of the property.
Well, sidewalks are part of the public record, so
Yeah,
it
but
would be
there's
open.
many cases that says that the applicant doesn't have to allow the public. He has to allow staff, and they have to allow you as a commission or in smaller groups on, but they do not have to allow the public onto their property if they choose not to. So I can't comment on what the applicant I can comment on what the applicant would say, but I can't comment on what Mass Mutual is, an insurance company, so, they're going to think in terms of liabilities, so we're going to have to bring it to their attention.
So can we send a tentative date, and then you can work with?
We'll work with them.
Staff.
Yeah, I'll have to talk to their
On
general
specifics?
counsel about it. I'm sure it'll be.
Would that be amenable?
What
So
are you looking at?
if that's the case and Mass Mutual is not okay with a public site walk, given how they gave permission for the application, then you'd be looking at next week just to give us enough time to verify that. So probably, it's hard for me to speculate a date depending on the review return of that.
Okay.
Well, we can have a motion for a public site walk based on a date
What if,
determined by
If
staff.
you get something into the middle of next week, I'm sure they're going to respond. I'll talk to them tomorrow.
well, you guys are pretty straightforward with the owners from what I've seen.
Yeah.
What if you set it for March 12th then, a Tuesday, just following week, to give enough time for the applicant to confer with the owner? They can reach out to staff. We can set up an agenda depending on that outcome.
Okay, and if someone wants to make a motion for that, and then just leave a clause that possibly changed due to needs from staff or.
So would you be looking at, and Carl, you can correct me on this, but would you be looking at tentatively March 8th, to possibly March 12th, or just March 12th?
I'm comfortable leaving it open so you can determine, make
Okay.
sure everybody's happy, and there's a number of wheels that have to turn here.
Okay.
Well, I would suggest you pick a date, and March 12th would probably be.
Yeah.
Want to do March 12th?
Yeah.
Well,
Sorry,
no-
Mr. Chair, well,
So-
we'd have to file the agenda at least
Oh, this
24
is
hours
true.
in advance.
Yeah.
That
So let's just
literally
make it March
gives us-
12th. That'll give you enough time?
Yeah, we'll have a response from them.
I think your staff, or you.
Just a quick question. We confer with Mass Mutual that the public is not allowed. Is that going to change anything here? Because I'm hearing.
No,
that-
No.
that
No.
anyone on this side of the room is allowed to go. Just anyone
That
on
would be
this side
correct.
is not. So is that still going to be okay?
Yeah.
The issue comes into play with, obviously it's a public hearing, but then the applicant and the owner have to allow public permission onto the site as well. I'm not too familiar with the legality behind that because all the site walks that I've helped staff during public hearings have accompanied the public. And if Mr. Landolina, being an experienced attorney as he is, I'm sure has knowledge in that, which we can confer with our town attorney as well.
Well, anything that happens on the site walk and all the information that comes forward is part of the record, and it'll be documented. Georgie will actually take notes, and there's no
discuss it.
We cannot discuss anything on the site walk. The site walk is just for us to look at the site, to make notes of what we see. There's no discussion of anything that happens there. It's just for that purpose.
One more thing I can add in confidence for the public. When we post an agenda, it gets posted of town clerk, and as a courtesy measure, considering the situation behind that, I can also post it on the Enfield Inland Wetlands Watercourse webpage. And on the agenda, it will specifically state whether or not if it's closed off to the public or not after we do some internal research. That way you're aware and you know what's going on. And then I take pretty thorough notes, if you've seen my notes. And I always take pictures as well. So they will be pretty thorough even if the public cannot attend.
I got that. Okay, so I'll move that we tentatively set the date of March 12th for a site walk on the Mass Mutual property and allow staff to firm up the details.
Time? 2 o'clock?
2 o'clock. And if that's not possible, staff will get back to us.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Nancy Martin.
All right. Seeing no discussion, roll call, please.
Kevin Zorda.
Yes.
Virginia Higley, yes. Kelly Hemler.
Yes.
Dylan Bridge.
Yes.
Nancy Martin.
Yes.
Ann Collins.
Yes.
Ken Coffin.
Yes.
7 in favor, none opposed. The motion carries. And I will also need a motion to continue the public hearing.
I move to continue the public hearing for IW 696, 85 and 100 Bright Meadow Boulevard and 113 Brainerd Road to the March 19th meeting.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? To the right?
Yes, I'd also like to motion to request a plan review and delineation verification through a third party.
Let's get through this first.
Okay.
Okay. Any discussion on this side? Okay. Roll call?
Kevin Zorda.
Yes.
Virginia Higley, yes. Kelly Hemler.
Yes.
Dylan Bridge.
Yes.
Nancy Martin.
Yes.
Ann Collins.
Yes.
Ken Kaufman.
Yes.
Mr. Chair.
What's that?
I just want to go over that details. My staff report is a work in progress. I made a recommendation motion about requesting a plan review and delineation verification by North Central Conservation District. I had typed up this report before I was able to speak with the manager at North Central. We pay a certain amount to the North Central Conservation District each year, and some of the services they provide municipalities are wetlands delineation verifications. So what that means is they don't do their own delineations. They just go out to site, and we give them the applicant's report, and they verify that report. And then they do plan review for erosion and sediment technical details. So it could be beneficial to use. However, there's some issues with this that I just found out. They have 2 soil scientists on staff that do this. They have quite a pending list of applications right now from what I heard from the manager. One of the issues being one of their soil scientists is on a month-long vacation leave. So I'm not sure when they would come back and if that could be done in time to be heard again on the 19th.
Seems like a trend with that.
Yes. Lots of soil scientists go on a lot of long vacations. But I mean, that motion is up for you to discuss. There are some risks with that associated. One being, I do not think it would be done in time by the 19th. You'd be looking at a possible extension request of such public hearing if you are to go down that route. And just keep in mind that this is a route I have not traveled down yet, so there would be new waters to learn.
Right, and honestly, I don't think we've ever had any issue with delineation from REMA in terms of wetlands, so to me, it's,
I concur.
yeah. I mean, he's a professional, so, any other thoughts other than that? I mean, I think the biggest concern would be the wildlife habitat kind of part of it.
Of course. The only real reason, like my true intent behind that recommendation was to give you all the authority that you know you have as an agency.
Sure.
The other being that since this is such a large scale project, I figured if there were some doubts about that, then that could be a way of rectification to ease those doubts.
Sure. Absolutely.
It's not like they're going to be like, George Logan is incorrect. They don't do that.
Yeah, and I
They
didn't
just
hear,
verify.
Yeah, I didn't hear a lot of concern about the delineation of the wetlands.
That's why
where
I
they
gave
were.
you that
Yeah.
giant archive report, because
Yeah.
that has all the history of the delineations. It has all the history of stormwater. My reports are very thorough, as George mentioned. So just a little tidbit to help you if you're confident in making a decision in case there were doubts, and this is an option that you have to explore.
Absolutely. So you're still welcome to make that motion if you like. I'm all set. Good. Anybody else like to make that motion? No? Okay. All right. So we're good?
Oh, no, you got to do the enforcement.
Oh, no, I know that. No, we're not adjourned, but we're done with new business.
You can stay, we're leaving. Thank you. We'll
Thank
see you
you.
in 2 weeks, thank you.
Okay.
All right. Enforcement report.
Don't skip old business.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. Old business. DPN number 2024-01-26, map 79, lot 11.
It's tabled.
Yes.
Yes, so at the at the February 20th meeting, we discussed, thank you. We discussed having this application be continued to March 5th. That was a mistake on my part. The applicant had actually requested March 19th. In my mind, I was thinking one meeting at a time. So March 19th is actually when they would like to be heard. And I do want to clarify, because I've had some public inquiries about why they keep getting tabled, why the public can't talk. DPNs are very different for wetlands. And for our new commissioners, they are requests for you guys to let you know that a farmer plans on doing intended activities for farming purposes. They don't have statute limitations supporting them, therefore there is no time limit to make a decision. There's no public portion to this because it's a request for jurisdictional ruling. Once the commission finds they have jurisdiction on such application, then it becomes a permit application, which is subject to the normal public petitioning period. Just want to clear that up for the record. But March 19th, they will be before you. They hope to present, and your next packet will include my staff report.
Do we need to make a new motion? Because I assume our motion
I would
was
make
for the
one
fifth.
more just to be safe.
Okay, I move to table DPN 2024-01-26, map 79, lot 11, request for a jurisdictional ruling for establishing agricultural crop fields. Cliff Chapman applicant, Mayfield Place.
Two.
LLC owner. Map 79, Lot 11, R44 zone, to March 19th.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Roll call?
Kevin Zorda.
Yes.
Virginia Higley, yes. Kelly Hemler.
Yes.
Dylan Bridge.
Yes.
Nancy Martin.
Yes.
Ann Collins.
Yes.
Ken Kaufman.
Yes.
7 in favor, none opposed. The motion carries. Okay, now enforcement reports?
I have a report. I don't have paperwork in front of you because this happened yesterday. This will be in front of you on March 19th. I received a complaint at 9 o'clock in the morning on Monday about a property down on 83 First Avenue. The owner had removed the sewer caps and was dumping sediment stuff into the sewer infrastructure pipeline. Upon doing some, because before we go out to site, we do internet research first. That includes aerials, any permits, quick research depending on what's going on. So this property has the Great Brook in the back. And as you recall, it is a straight brook. It's a straight line going through those subdivisions up to the northeast, going underneath the highway to the Connecticut River. The owner of the site has done significant excavation and fill activities where he has dammed up the brook, put in roadways, and has completely rerouted Great Brook. It is now, instead of a straight line, it is a dammed up spot, and the water has relocated itself southward due west around the entire property, encroaching on private properties now. Because of this activity, it has caused significant flooding due east where the subdivisions are, and it has ruined that flow of water that once existed.
Wow.
So not only are we looking at a zoning violation, a flood violation, we're looking at a severe wetlands violation. There are construction activities. There's pens right by the brook. There's debris falling into the brook. There are pictures that we took on site showing the amount of water that is no longer present at site, the amount of fill that was brought in, the amount of sewage that has seeped all over the property. The lateral has broken. There's now a sinkhole in place, and it's about almost 30 grand in infrastructure repairs from DPW last time I talked to them. That could be different now.
Tell me there's a...
Hang
Go
on.
ahead.
We have notified our state departments of spill management and prevention. We have notified the Army Corps of Engineers, and we have notified DEEP of the activity since it is a pretty detrimental activity. So from March 19th, you will be receiving pictures and reports of what's happening on site. Something important to note about this is our cease and desist has a section where if we issue a cease and desist, the applicant has to come before you in 10 days.
Yeah.
So what we thought best due to the situation of time is if we issue him a notice of violation today, and then on the 9th, give him a cease and desist. And then he can come before you on the 19th if he comes.
Has the town attorney been
I'm pretty
notified
sure
as
they
well?
have been
'Cause-
contacted by DPW. There's certain, don't quote me on this, but criminal mischief charges that can
Yeah.
come into play depending on damage to public infrastructure. So it's quite a hefty discovery that we were dealing with all day on Monday. It was covered in mud. But you'll get everything you need to help you move forward with that on the 19th. And that is the only report I have.
That's not enough?
Surprise.
Wow, that is that's shocking. Okay, report of planning staff. Do you have anything else?
No. No.
All right.
There's so
and,
much in my brain. For the 19th, though, there should be something.
So applications to be received.
We have one, and I have a description if you'd let me, or
Certainly.
would like me
Yep,
to.
go right ahead.
Okay. IW 697. This is map 81, lot 9, corner of North Maple Street and Shaker Road. Application for a wetlands permit for the development of a self-storage facility with associated activities in 200-foot upland review area of Freshwater Brook. Pullman Realty LLC applicant Mark Pollock, owner, map 81, lot 9, I-1 zone.
Thank you. All right, any miscellaneous? Anything further? No?
No, you're doing great work.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, preparation has been just incredible.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I really appreciate
Make a motion to
that.
adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay.
So it's
10:03. 10:03.
10:03. I just want to make note, now that the meeting, I now have the record.